Board. Secretary Ringgold, will you please call the roll?
Commissioner Benny.
Here.
Commissioner Carbajal Moran. Commissioner Engelhardt.
Here.
Commissioner Forney.
Here.
Commissioner Frederick.
Here.
Commissioner Garcia.
Here.
Commissioner Rucker. Vice President Deshpande.
Here.
President Olson.
Here.
You have a quorum.
All right, and if someone would please move the minutes, or the agenda.
I will move the agenda.
Second.
Okay, is there any discussion on the agenda? All right, seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That, our agenda is approved. And would someone please move the minutes?
I will move the regular meeting minutes of August 5th, 2026.
Second.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And with that, the minutes of August 5th, 2026 are approved. We don't have a full reports of officers, but I will turn it to you, Superintendent Bangora, because I believe you have an announcement.
All right, thank you, President Olson and Commissioners. I'm going to invite Jeremy, Assistant Superintendent of Environmental Stewardship, Jeremy Barrett, to introduce a new employee for us as an organization. We're excited to have him, but I'm going to turn it over to Jeremy.
Thank you, Superintendent. Good evening, Commissioners. Yes, I'm very excited to introduce to you the new director of the newly formed Citywide Services and Projects Department. So last year, we made the move. We had the Asset Management Department, which was comprised of about 10 managers with trades, fleet, horticulture, citywide equipment, projects and systems, along with park maintenance and operations. And so we split that department into two. We still have the Asset Management Department, which is park maintenance operations. And then we have a Citywide Services and Projects, which consists of the trades, horticulture, fleet, citywide services, and then projects and systems. And with that, then I will introduce you to Michael McCulloch, who joins us after a storied career, I would say, in the Air Force of more than 20 years. He's a retired Air Force superintendent of maintenance, local Minnesota guy, saw the opportunity to join us, brings with him a wealth of experience and leadership and knowledge, and has already rolled up his sleeves in the last week and a half to get to know folks. So I think he's prepared a few things. I'll turn it over to him.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is Michael McCullough. As Jeremy said, I'm the new Director of Park Services and Projects. Started on August 10th. Coming to the Park Board, I have a background, like I said, I'm going to repeat everything that Jeremy just kind of said a little bit, but aircraft production, 21 years in the Air Force. I'm honored to be joining this team. Over the last couple weeks already, I've already focused on getting out into the field, meeting all my managers and their staff, and learning the operations firsthand. And I look forward to working with this board and also my fellow directors to keep the parks and facilities running and well for the community. And that's kind of it. That's my statement. So, thank you.
Welcome.
Fantastic. Thank you. Welcome. Okay, well, welcome, and we look forward to seeing your work in the future here. All right, moving on, reports of appointees to outside boards, commissions, or committees. Commissioners, do we have any updates? Okay, seeing none, we'll then move on to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to move the consent agenda as a slate?
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
Second. All right, with that, all those in favor of approving our consent business, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? With that, the consent agenda is approved. Okay, and we have one item on the agenda tonight, well, two items, but the first one on the agenda is presentation of the superintendent's recommended budget. Superintendent Bangora and Director Julie Wiseman, welcome. We look forward to your presentation.
Yeah, I just had it sitting up here just for that, but otherwise, I don't know why it's not on. Thank you. The script's on. She has to do it from up there.
Pointing the finger.
It's disabled.
Can you just switch on the monitor?
I'll turn the screen down when I get up here, though. I'll turn it down. My place is like a podium. Yeah. I don't have to have the screen on there, but.
Does it have power?
Oh. Oh, disconnected. My apologies, President Olson and Commissioners. We're trying to, I think we had unplugged on the screen, so we're working on it right now. One moment. And then just moves it down, right?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that awkward pause there, but I think we can get started. So thank you for your patience on that one. We figured it out, power button, probably simple. All right, President Olson and Commissioners, it's an honor and a privilege to present my superintendent's recommended 2027 and 2028 budget. Thank you. So at the heart of this budget is a simple responsibility. We are stewards of something that belongs to the people of Minneapolis. We have inherited a remarkable park and recreation system, and the decisions we make today will determine the strength, the quality, and the accessibility of that system for generations to come. I also want to recognize, of course, this board for the work that you've done to prepare for this budget. You have invested significant time and understanding around the organization, the financial position, labor relations, our strategic directions, and the challenges and opportunities before us. This work has created a stronger foundation for all of you and for the important decisions that we'll make together going forward. So great job on that and really appreciate your work on it. Yes. Yep. Oh yeah. There we go. All right. So, and we know this is an especially important moment for our park system. That's very clear. So this year, we open the Upper Harbor Park, a transformational 20-acre regional park on the riverfront. We're also nearing the completion of the largest investment ever made in a neighborhood park at North Commons, and these investments represent our commitment to the communities that have historically experienced less investment, and they demonstrate what is possible when we combine vision, passion, resources, and of course, strong partnerships to do these legacy moments for our park system. But our responsibility does not stop, of course, at ribbon cuttings. We have to staff our parks. We have to maintain them. We have to program them. We have to activate them, and to make sure residents can fully experience the opportunities that were promised to them. This reality is reflected in this budget. This is our second two-year budget process, and I believe that approach gives us an important advantage. It allows us to look beyond a single fiscal year, make thoughtful investments as a board, evaluate results, and better understand the long-term implications of the choices we make today. We also enter this budget process with a clear financial reality. In July, the board supported a 5.86% tax levy increase request to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, or the BET. That request is designed to maintain current service levels, address wage and benefit increases and other inflationary pressures, and provide resources necessary to maintain the standard of services at North Commons and Upper Harbor, and at other locations that we have made significant new investments. We recognize that this request is higher than the mayor's recommended 2.5% increase, and we recognize the financial pressures facing Minneapolis residents and, of course, the city as a whole. So these are difficult decisions. Our responsibility is to be honest about what it costs to provide the level of services our residents expect, while at the same time being disciplined and responsible with public resources. And that is an important theme on this budget I want to emphasize. We must do both. We must protect the services and assets that matter most in our communities, while also changing the way we think about the long-term financial sustainability of this organization. This means reducing our reliance on property taxes. It means developing sustainable and diversified revenue. It means making strategic investments today to create greater opportunities for tomorrow. And it means asking ourselves an important question: what are the legacy moments we want to create for the next generation of Minneapolis residents? This recommended budget is built around those responsibilities. It continues implementation of the Parks for All advances and the board's newly adopted 2027 to 2030 strategic directions and performance goals. It prioritizes the care for our park facilities, infrastructure, and natural areas. It invests in employees who deliver these services every single day. It continues our commitment to youth through employment, recreation, safety, pathways that help young people build skills and connections. It strengthens our stewardship for natural areas. It supports safety at some of our highest priority locations. And it continues to embed racial equity in our budget decisions, including neighborhood and regional park investments, recreation center funding, and departmental budget actions that you all are well aware of. Importantly, this budget also recognizes that all 47 recreation centers must have a future. They must be viable, vibrant places of excellence, and respond to the needs of communities they serve. Our responsibility is not simply to manage what we've inherited. Our responsibility is to strengthen it, invest in it, carry this legacy forward as an organization. Finally, we have become increasingly intentional about telling our story and sharing our impact. Residents deserve to understand not only what we spend, but where their investment produces the values of parks, recreation, youth opportunities, natural areas, right, public safety, and the places where people come together as a community. This is why revenue diversification, organizational sustainability, and demonstrating our impact are important components of this budget. So, commissioners, this budget is more than a financial document. It is a statement of priorities. It is a statement of what we believe Minneapolis parks should be. It is a statement of our responsibility to the residents we serve. This will be a difficult choices ahead, and I know that it will be difficult. There will be questions, of course, right? There will be adjustments. There will be decisions for this board to make throughout the budget process. But I truly believe this recommended budget gives us a strong foundation, one that balances the needs of today with our responsibility for tomorrow. So I'd like to thank you for the work you have already done, the tremendous work you've already done, and invested in this process. It's been really a pleasure to be working with you to this point. And thank you for your partnership and your involvement. You've done wonderful work. And with that, before I introduce Director Weissman, I also want to say an incredible gratitude to our staff. They're amazing people. And sometimes they don't get the credit, but they're in the behind the scenes as a wonderful person has said, sausage making that happens behind the scenes, right? Our the Deputy Superintendent Jennifer Ringgold, Assistant Superintendent of Environmental Stewardship Jeremy Barrick, Assistant Superintendent of Planning Michael Schroeder, Assistant Superintendent of Recreation Nicole Hernandez, and of course our brilliant Julie Weissman, Director of Finance, and I've called Paul Rosen, who worked really hard and just are amazing people, and all the directors and managers and stuff that spent tremendous amount of time working on this to bring forward this budget to you. So I want to acknowledge them, their hard work, and it's a privilege to be working for them and with them and representing this amazing park system as your superintendent. So with that, I'm going to turn us over to Director Weissman, who will walk us through the details of the superintendent's recommended 2027-2028 budget. So thank you for your time.
Good evening, Commissioners, President Olson and Commissioners. Before I start, I'd like to say that all of the budget documents that you will be receiving this evening are posted on our public website at www.minneapolisparks.org/budget. So again, we are presenting a 2-year budget this evening. What that means is that the superintendent recommends and the board approves an annual budget each year. The 2027 budget will be appropriated and the 2028 budget plan will be approved by the board in December of 2026. In typical supplemental years, the MPRB will focus on reforecasting revenues and assessing performance data, and the 2028 plan serves as the basis for the supplemental budget. When developing the 2027 and 2028 budget, this board worked together and worked on preparing and developing the strategic directions as well as the budget process, and we began that work in February. Factors impacting the budget includes pressure to wages, inflation, capital needs, our system equity investment requirements, the reduced revenue resulting from the decline in property tax collection rates, and then, of course, the growing disparity between the MPRB's financial forecasts and the city's projected property tax levy increases for the MPRB. Funding the workforce, maintenance, programming, and activation at Upper Harbor and North Commons Park was at the forefront of our conversations. And again, this board is committed to your strategic directions, supporting a maximum tax levy increase sufficient to maintain current service levels, pursue new and diversified revenues, and protect access to parks and recreation investments in youth and employees, park assets, and natural areas care and maintenance. Again, as the superintendent identified, this board adopted a maximum property tax levy increase of 5.86%. that is broken into 3 areas. $3.8 million for wage and fringe adjustments to maintain our current service levels, $1.4 million in inflationary adjustments to our material supplies and contractual services, and then $1 million for North Commons and Upper Harbor Parks and support for other new amenities throughout our system. For balancing this budget, we increased revenue through innovative staff-led suggestions, market-based increases in fees in some categories, shifting of resources to meet current needs, and use of vacancy savings to support one-time requests. This board also developed this 2027 to 2030 strategic direction, performance goals, and priority comprehensive plan strategies. You identified your hopes, hurdles, and pathways, and that information directed the development of the strategic directions that were adopted in July of 2026. In the recommended budget for the strategic direction A, leading through climate action, the recommended budget is supported by the department budget actions in identifying and developing evaluative standards for measurements of climate resiliency in decision-making. Initiate and finalize research around climate-forward land management, and research and analyze park board offerings and geographical access. For strategic direction B, creating pathways for youth employment skills and safety. For youth employment and program pathways, the 2027 budget includes funding for a youth garden crew at Upper Harbor Park, part-time recreation and aquatic staff at North Commons Park, part-time concession staff in golf, a youth referee training program, and youth programming certifications and training. The 2028 budget includes stormwater best management practice, young adult crew at Upper Harbor Park. And then in safety through collaboration, the 2027 budget not only includes staffing at North Commons Park, but also includes 2 park police officers, the conversion of part-time park patrol agents to full-time agents, and an increase in park agent and street reach attendant hours. For strategic direction C, enhancing our stewardship for natural resources, the recommended budget includes in 2027 the conversion of seasonal natural resource specialists into 3 full-time environmental program specialists. It also includes in 2028 the planned addition of a full-time wildlife program position. For strategic direction D, sharing our impact and funding our future, the recommended budget includes in 2027 building on the staff-led revenue teamwork and includes non-property tax revenue increases of $908,000 in 2027 for the general fund and $1.2 million in the enterprise fund. The 2027 budget also includes comprehensive website redesign and strategic brand refresh. Now I'm going to go through the highlights by division and department, and I'll try not to repeat things that I've already talked about and add in the things that I have not. So in the superintendent's office, we had to reduce contractual services in order to support a part-time data request position. As you know, data requests have really elevated over the last few years, and this part-time position will add capacity to respond to those requests within the state mandated guidelines. Communications and marketing, the website redesign and strategic brand refresh is considered a one-time expense, and we are utilizing we're using one-time funds generated through vacancy savings in order to accomplish this work. In community connections and violence prevention, you have the increase in street reach attendant hours. And then in park police, you have the information that I have already shared. In the deputy superintendent's office, this is where the part-time data request position will live. And so there's the increase for that part-time position, as well as a decrease in contractual services in the deputy superintendent office that's related to data request services. So we'll no longer need to contract that work if we have a part-time person in-house. For the finance department, there's use of one-time funds generated through vacancy savings in both 27 and 28 to provide the backfill support needed for our department for the Workday ERP system implementation. It allows our staff to be involved with the implementation and the configuration and testing and everything that is involved with that type of implementation, and have the backfill to help us get through the day-to-day activities. The 2027 budget also includes an increase in sponsorship revenue and an increase in the general administrative charge to the enterprise fund. The 2028 budget includes a plan for a certified part-time sponsorship specialist position, along with a planned increase in sponsorship revenue to support continued revenue diversification. This part-time position would be focused on more neighborhood, small sponsorships as opposed to larger corporate sponsorships. In human resources, we have, again, the use of one-time vacancy savings to provide backfill support for the Workday ERP system implementation. So HR has the same needs as we do, since Workday is implementing both HR, payroll, and finance aspects. And then also, the labor relations position was a position that this board supported. We are accomplishing the addition of that position through a conversion of a vacant position. So we're actually going to be doing that in 2026. So wanted to just highlight that for the board as it was, it came forward as a request from this body. In environmental stewardship for asset management, for 2027, we have the addition of 2 park keepers, seasonal park maintenance workers, and increases in material supplies and contractual services associated with North Commons, Upper Harbor Parks, as well as Southwest Light Rail Station being added by our system, and athletic field improvements. It also supports 2028 when Graco will come online and Towerside Park and Wedge Point Parks come online. So there's additional seasonal park maintenance workers hours in 2028. And in 2027, it includes a conversion of a certified part-time administrative assistant to a full-time, utilizing savings within the department.
All right, that'll be a good time to pause for open time. And I will read the rules for open time at 5:30. Thanks to those of you who've come to speak during tonight's open time. The board's open time rules are as follows. I will call on people from the speaker list only. Names are added to the speaker list by calling in before 3 p.m. in the day of the meeting or by adding it in person at the board meeting before 5:30 p.m. The time allotted for all speakers shall not exceed 15 minutes. Once we see how many speakers we have, we will let you know how many exactly minutes each person gets. Time may not be transferred to someone else. Please watch the timer and stay within your allotted time. This is an opportunity for you to address the board. We are listening but will not respond. That said, please don't hesitate to contact any of the commissioners for dialogue and further discussion. To protect the privacy of individuals, please refrain from commenting on specific personnel issues or pending litigation. Discriminatory or harassing words directed at anyone will not be tolerated, and each speaker is asked to state their name and address. And we will wait for the list of speakers. All right, and with 4 speakers, that'll be 3 minutes per speaker. I will also note for the record that Commissioner Carvajal Moran is in attendance, arrived at about 5:10, and Commissioner Rucker, I forgot to mention this, has an excused absence. He let me know that he would not be able to make it beforehand. So first off, we have Cordelia Pearson and then Ron Werner.
Commissioners, my name is Cordelia Pearson. I live at 512 7th Street Southeast. President Olson, commissioners, staff. I've been fortunate professionally and personally to do a lot with the Mississippi River, Metro Regional Commissioner for the Mississippi River Parkway Commission. I was the executive director of the Minneapolis Riverfront Partnership, the chair of the East of the River Citizen Advisory Committee. I served on the Central Mississippi River Regional Park Plan. And right now, I'm very grateful to be lead steward for the Father Hennepin Bluffs stewardship team that's supported by your Natural Resources Division and Planning team. And I volunteer and steward. I worked for the Trust for Public Land for 12 years, doing Mississippi River land acquisition and program development, and had the good fortune of working with your Council Rice on a lot of initiatives. So while 600 Main Street Southeast brought me here tonight, I speak to all of your riverfront priorities, and I'm thrilled to see how the Upper Harbor Park is coming along. What you decide for 600 Southeast Main will affect all of your future park development, not just this site. I sent a letter to you all this afternoon. I'll just make a few highlights. Trust your plan. You chose only a few land acquisition spots. This was one. It's a tiny triangle, and it is the only land on the east of the river that is in private hands, that isn't industrial. This is in the attachments. If you look locally, it is what you see when you come across the Stone Arch Bridge. It is the welcome to the river in the Central Riverfront East Bank. There are many public benefits to this site. It is not only the portage site, but it has other public benefits as well. So trust your plan. Honor your promise. Thousands of staff hours and community hours went towards developing this plan. We did it thoughtfully, and we did not lightly choose any lands for acquisition. We did not lightly recommend expanding the park boundary to include this parcel. Avoid bad precedents. There are always unwilling sellers. I worked at the Trust for Public Land, and we got Burlington Northern Santa Fe Railroad to the table, and we have Wakantipi now, a native-led park in St. Paul. Unwilling sellers are difficult, not impossible. The only thing a rezoning would do is have a higher appraised value. That means that when you're ready to purchase the land, if it's been rezoned, you will pay more for it than you do today. Significant change in the riverfront. The only thing since 2023, when he last submitted a proposal like this, is that the native-led transformation of the West Bank and all the visioning that has happened there. Allies will help you. Time is on your side. Difficult things take time. The impossible just takes a little longer. You said no in 2009, say no again. Thank you.
Thank you, Cordelia. Ron Werner and then Billy Menz.
Good evening. Ron Warner, west side of Cedar Lake. Tonight, I'm going to borrow a phrase from Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan's powerful campaign acceptance speech that describes the situation at Southeast Cedar Lake perfectly. This is about public park accessibility for the many versus private park accessibility for the money. And my open time topic will amplify this issue fully. At the June 21st, 2023 Park Board Amendments meeting for the Cedar Isles Master Plan, former Park Commissioner Elizabeth Schaefer proposed an amendment that stated, quote, if existing amenities at Cedar Lake Regional Park needed maintenance before a new dock is added, said needed deferred maintenance would have to be corrected. I believe the community would take one less dock if they knew our maintenance is prioritized before adding new amenities. Commissioner Schaefer was rewarded with unrestrained cacophony of applause from the mostly Park Lane audience who did not support the added dock for South Cedar Beach. And Park Commissioner Schaefer was a loyal soldier for the money, eager to offer snags for a small dock at Southeast Cedar Lake for the public. Of course the community would accept one less dock at Southeast Cedar Beach. The Park Lane residents have no need for any public dock. Every summer, fall season, they put in their 7 to 8 private docks on the public shoreline at Southeast Cedar Lake for their private enjoyment. For the Park Board to allow 7 docks for private use along the Southeast Cedar Lake for the privileged, wealthy Park Lane residents, and then put up roadblocks for one small public dock at the very crowded, busy South Beach area, a dock that was endorsed by the full Cedar Isles Master Plan. How in any way is that reflecting the fiduciary duty of the Minneapolis Park Board to act for the benefit of the public interest? Park Commissioner Schaefer was cognizant of the money residents' disapproval of the small public dock in the Cedar Isles Master Plan, and she created a path to obstruct its implementation. For a park board that prides itself on public access to all public parkland, to me, this is shameful behavior by the park board. It is time for the park board to open this public parkland for public use. For 87 years, the many have lost public access, and the money have been rewarded with private lakeshore, and no end is in sight.
Thank you, Ron.
None of this could occur without the facilitation of the park board. Thank you.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, hey. Thank you.
Billy Menz and then Mike Tate.
Hi, everybody. Billy Menz, 1812 Pierce Street, Northeast. I think that today is a really important day for this board. It's the first budget. This budget is not an easy thing to go through. There are a lot of hidden pieces in there that continue to move forward. I am a resource if you would like to reach out. I don't know if some of you might want that, but I was consistently trying to make budget amendments. I would encourage you to go through that process and see where you can find those cost savings. I'd like to offer a little bit of a disagreement with the superintendent around what our responsibility is in this budget. We do need youth activated in our parks. We don't need to program everything. We have partnerships. We can make stronger partnerships. We can turn over the keys more to our partners. One issue that you should look at is rec center staff and rec center leaders. We have had an institutional practice of moving around these rec center directors. That's destructive to community, not only destructive to the worker who has to move. There is no transition policy. There is no way for those new rec center directors to understand who the partners are in the community in order to provide that programming that will activate those spaces more strongly. We need revenue. I encourage you strongly to look at revenue and how that is generated. One of the things that you'll see is probably that golf is producing a lot of revenue in the enterprise fund. Parking produces revenue. I think that there is a policy in this park board that golf revenue goes back to golf. That's not fair. Golf revenue should go to other things as well. We should utilize that golf revenue to support other programs within the enterprise fund, like fields. One thing that I would like to highlight, Parade Stadium is one of the most primarily awesome stadiums in the state, and we don't take care of it very well. We have a $5 parking fee there, and none of that money goes directly to that stadium. Please try to rectify that if you can. Also, I'd like to highlight that in the message, there is no mention of youth sports. Youth sports is one of the primary things that citizens consistently share that is the responsibility and one of the things that they love that the park board provides. We refuse to highlight that. We refuse to outline that as a budget line item. We need to do that. Or we need to turn the youth sports over to community partners who can do it effectively at lower cost and activate those partnerships. Otherwise, we're just not being clear about what we're spending on those programs, which families and communities and young people need, keeps them safe, keeps them activated in high school, gets them to varsity playing, which gets them to graduation rates. These are very important. I am totally available to you at any moment in time, if you would like my perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Billy. And Mike Tate.
Well, welcome, y'all. How y'all doing? I've been here for about 20 budgets. 40 years, y'all. I've been seeing it through and through. And I always bring my sign. So how are the children? You folks are going through your first. Just last year, I think it was a Wednesday at the BTE. Meg Forney calls Coach. And I got to remind y'all of this stuff. Say, hey, Coach, come and talk to Jacob in the BTE to secure $2.5 million to hire 22 programmers is what they told me. I said, sure. If it's going to program the park for the youth, I'll be there and I'll speak with pride and love. I think you were there, Mr. Benny. And I spoke proudly of this organization, which I always will. But you keep letting me down. You want to take it out on the children. This is the first thing he used. North Commons as a bait to make people feel sorry for North Siders. Well, bro, we don't need you to do that, Mr. Olson. We had that thing built long before you got here, bro. And the one thing that you could have done is put together a budget before we got to Jacob's budget to let people know how much North Commons was going to be costing, real cost, and what it takes to run it. But now you want to throw it up because now Jacob's going to take some money away and put it back on us. Late again. Because again, you don't include the people, like Billy said, the youth development part, the policy part that leads to youth playing safely in our parks, done by the partners who walk out there proudly every day for free, 40 years, 6 hours a day, August through November, Monday through Saturday. Gave my life to that football program. But it built a lot of people. It built me, made me a better person, made me understand about what the fight was about, as the many fights that I fought with this organization. Because when they need some money, call Coach. He'll come speak. Deborah Hollins came. Call Coach. He'll speak. When we got the money to the North Commons, call Coach. He'll speak. So I know what I'm talking about, y'all. Please don't undervalue yourselves and don't undervalue the children. I'm going to leave you with this one because I heard it on the Twins, and they give you a lot of money. Let kids play.
Okay. Thank you, Mike Tate. We will now return to our budget presentation. Director Wiseman.
All right. President Olson and commissioners will continue with environmental stewardship. Citywide services and projects have additional staffing for the system equity investment, just like asset management. In 2027 and 2028, they are receiving hours for trades workers and seasonal gardeners. In environmental management, to support the increased public use and activation of Upper Harbor Park, the 27 and 28 budgets include the information that I previously shared. And in addition to that, in environmental education, the 2027 budget includes a provisional wage analysis, the conversion of seasonal natural resource specialists to the full-time natural resource horticulture position, and partial funding provided through, let me start over with that one. So in the 2027 budget, we will be creating a full-time natural resource horticultural specialist position. This will be a shared cost between the Park Board and the Friends of the Wildflower Garden. It will increase an environmental education program fees that will reflect increased participation through the expansion of services offered with this position. In forestry, we have an increase for our woody debris disposal budget. We grind our trees and have to haul it away, and it has become exceedingly more expensive. So we needed to add money to the budget for that. And then we are going to be recommending an annual increase to stump grinding over the next 5 years to address inflationary costs, as well as the very large backlog that we have of stumps along our city streets, which was largely created through the emerald ash borer issue. In the recreation division, in athletic programs and aquatics, we have the increases for North Commons Park Fieldhouse and Water Park, and also an increase to various fees based on market conditions and increased participation. In youth and recreation centers and programs, we have the increases for North Commons Park, as well as the addition of 6 certified part-time Spark Studio positions and a corresponding reduction in contractual services to fund those positions. So that will increase capacity within our Spark Studios. For revenue diversification, we're continuing the implementation of the new revenue opportunities that were identified and budgeted in 2026. We're introducing a credit card fee pass-through for customers who use credit cards in 2027. We're expanding the sponsorship program in 2028. And we're continuing to explore additional opportunities, including the Parks on Tap program and billboard advertising. We also have 2 investments that we make annually. The first one is operation facilities to support upgrades to facilities that have demonstrated operational inefficiency and a lack of suitable accommodations for employees. So it maintains or it restores that transfer. And then we have a transfer into our parkland acquisition fund for River First acquisitions. For our special revenue fund in environmental stewardship, this is where the natural area management fund, this is where the increase will happen with the 3 full-time environmental program specialists, and the increase in costs will be supported through the state operation and maintenance lottery and loop proceeds. And then we maintain the transfer to the general fund of the Urban Tree Carbon Offset Program revenue that supports tree purchases in both 27 and 28. Moving into our enterprise fund, the Deputy Superintendent's Office for the Sculpture Garden, there's an increase in revenue to develop a private rental package. We've started to get a lot of interest in having weddings at that location, and setting up the structure in order to be able to do that is included in this budget. For parking operations, there's an addition of metered parking along West Bedé-McCoska Parkway between West 36th Street and Xerxes Avenue. In vendor agreements and concessions, this budget includes the addition of a full-time concession position to help manage the multitude of concession agreements that we are having, and to oversee that program. And it also includes various concession revenue adjustments to align with expected revenue projections. In use and event permitting, there is an increase in the vendor on-site fee, and then there is an establishment of a mobile food cart fee and a liquor catering flat rate fee. So this opens up the opportunity for mobile food carts within our system, and a mechanism for that to happen. For recreation in the enterprise fund, golf operations, we will be transitioning to managing concessions internally at Worth and Hiawatha golf courses. That includes concession revenue and an increase in golf attendance. We did that in 2026 for Meadowbrook Golf Course to much success, and really a significant increase in revenue at that location. So we are going to be moving 2 more golf courses to that. At the ice arenas, we will increase ice rental rates based on competitive markets in 27 and 28. And then, of course, the general fund administrative charge is increasing to the enterprise fund, and that is directly related to the labor relations position, which will also support employees within the enterprise fund. The recommended budget also includes an enterprise fund CIP. It allocates $2 million of reserves, and it will start the Columbia Golf Course building envelope renovations, Worth Golf Course parking lot redesign and replacement, and allocations to several rehabilitation categories.
Director Wiseman, I'm going to pause you. Commissioners, we had some folks from Little Earth who were hoping to speak, but we moved pretty quickly through open time, so arrived late. So I'd like to entertain a motion to suspend the rules to allow folks from the community to have 3 minutes to address the board.
So moved.
Seconded.
Okay. I don't think we have discussion on motions to suspend the rules, or do we, Councilor Rice? No. So all those in favor of suspending the rules, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? With that, the rules are suspended. Allison, I have on the sheet, if you would like to come up and introduce yourself, and I believe, 3 minutes. Thank you. and welcome.
Hi, so my name is Allison Haro Neto. I am here representing Little Earth and the neighbors of East Phillips. I'm here to ask the commissioners to support funding in building a splash pad at Cedar Avenue Field Park, which is next to Little Earth in the East Phillips neighborhood. And the Little Earth community represents the 39 tribal nations, and they use the park all the time. This is an important third space in our community, especially for our kids and because of safety. The summers are getting hot, and we need a place to stay cool in the summer. Our kids need a safe place to have fun and a safe place to feel protected. Please find funding in the budget to help build the splash pad at Cedar Field. It would be life-changing, not only for our kids, for our community, but for our neighborhood overall. Yeah, thank you. It's kind of short.
Great. Thanks, Allison. Okay. Well, I believe, and we have another person like this. Okay. All good on that? All right. And then we will then end that portion of open time and return to the presentation, Julie.
All right, so we're on to the Enterprise Fund Stormwater Fund. Again, this was established in 2024, and it creates the MPRB Stormwater Utility Fee, and it supports this to sustain, protect, and enhance the stormwater management system and cover annual costs of water quality and stormwater monitoring and water quality education. So the 2027 and 2028 budget does not include an increase to the MPRB stormwater charge. It utilizes 2025 stormwater fund reserves in order to balance the program. This occurred last year, or this year for 2026. However, having 2 more additional years of no increase is actually stalling the growth of our program and development of the program. So this budget includes the elimination of a full-time environmental naturalist educator position, as well as a full-time stormwater specialist position that was previously approved by the board. The 2027 and 2028 budget plan includes an increase to contractual services, as we will need to rely more on contractual services until we can get that increase in the utility fee and restart the establishment and development of the program. Also included in this recommended budget, the JPA is very near to be able to go to the City Council and the Park Board for approval. Within that document, it states that we need to request our rate increases at the 2-year budget process, the beginning of a 2-year budget process. So our next opportunity for an increase will be in 2029 and 2030. So in this budget, we have included a plan for 2029 and a plan for 2030 that reestablishes those positions that were eliminated in this budget cycle, as well as some additional positions to begin the growth of the program. The Stormwater Fund includes a 2027 to 2032 CIP. It is funded currently at $400,000 per year, and it is being currently funded through the city's stormwater fee, and that was an agreement that we reached with the city. Beginning in 2029 and 2030, you will see that we would include that $400,000 within our utility fee. And we would be taking that over in those years. For our internal service funds, under the Deputy Superintendent's Office, Information Technology Services includes a budget increase in overtime, material, and supplies to support operational needs. In 2027, it also includes the addition of VMware infrastructure to improve network redundancy and resilience, and we are funding that through the use of the IT reserve balance. For environmental stewardship in our equipment services, the 2027 budget includes the purchase of 2 autonomous hybrid mowers and required software subscriptions. Our capital project budget will be presented tonight. Director Adam Arvinson will be presenting that to you. So now we'll move into the actual budget book, and the rest of this presentation is laid out in the sections of the budget book that you will receive. So the budget message and the budget highlights are the first part of the budget book, and that is the information that the superintendent and I have just provided to you. Again, our strategic directions and performance goals are included in this budget, and the way that they're included, I provided an example of strategic direction D and performance measure 1, which happens to be one that I'm responsible for. So within the budget book, it shows the strategic direction, and then it provides you with the 4 years of budget actions that the staff work team will take part in order to meet this performance goal. And then again, we outline with each budget cycle what things have been included in the budget that supports this performance goal. And for 2027 and 28, that's the shifting of the credit card fees, implementing Parks on Tap, exploring billboards, and continuing the exploration of sponsorships and the planned expansion of that program. This is an example of the budget action. So this is included in the Finance Department's budget section of the budget book, and it shows the action for 2027 as well as the tasks that will be completed in the 2027 calendar year to accomplish this action. The next section of the budget book is the background information. It includes the service area and commissioner district maps, organizational chart, fund descriptions, and acronym glossary. Then we get into the financial part of the budget book, and we start with property and local government aid. So for property taxes, it shows this is kind of a composite. We're in a different part of the cycle. So for the total city, Minneapolis, the Municipal Building Commission, and the Teachers Retirement Association, those have come directly from the mayor's recommended budget. The Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board property tax line is reflective of the board adopted increase of 5.86. So the mayor's recommended budget talks about an 11.1% increase in the total tax. That's with us at 2.5%. If we are at 5.86%, that would increase the total tax to 11.8%. And then you'll see the chart where it shows that the city is 82% of the property tax, of the total property taxes, and the park board is 16.5%. And later on, when we have the presentation about the mayor's recommended budget, I'll have some additional information and a chart that shows how our percentage is declining. For local government aid, it is staying flat, and we're projecting that it would stay flat for 2027 and 28. This is something that stays on our legislative agenda. It has been quite a while since we've seen an increase in local government aid, and it is part of our, well, it's part of sales tax revenue of the state. So it's considered a non-property tax revenue in our calculations. So in the general fund, this is my favorite picture of this year. I love going there. Our revenue by major sources, you will see that property taxes increasing at the 5.86% and the planned increase in 2028 of 4.5%. For fees, fines, and other revenues, we have a 7.7% increase in 2027 and a planned 10.6% increase in 2028. And as far as the revenue diversification performance measure, if we are able to make these targets that we are setting for ourselves, we would be at approximately 10.5% increase in the non-property tax revenue. If local government aid went up, that would help the equation. Our overall general fund is increasing by 5.6%. I'll ask you to remember that one. That one will become important during the mayor's recommended budget conversation. So property taxes are 81.5% of the total tax. That is a couple of tenths of a percentage point higher than last year, even though our fees, fines, and other revenues increased. Because local government aid did not, we weren't able to shift the dial on the property taxes in this projection. For expenditures by major category, you'll see that wages and fringe are increasing by 5.6%, and that is largely due to a 10% increase in health insurance. And then operating costs are increasing by 6.1. Oh, I'm sorry. So wage and fringe includes the increase in health insurance, but it also includes the system equity investment. So that is why it's at 5.6%. In our general fund, almost 73% of our budget is wages and fringe. So we are definitely a service-led organization. Our expenditures by division, environmental stewardship makes up almost half of our general fund budget, with recreation being the second largest. And you can see the increases there. You'll see a large increase in the city management contributions and other. That is due to the fact that we have 4 unions that will be in negotiations. So we hold a provision for wage adjustments in this line item until we have approved contracts, and then those dollars move out into the departments that they belong in. Our general fund 6-year financial projections. We are requesting a 5.86% increase in 2027. We're looking forward to 2028 and needing approximately 4.53%, 4% in 2029, 3.3%, and so on. And again, these will become important when we have the mayor's conversation, which we will do after this presentation. System equity investment, this is where we project our budgets for the new facilities as they come online. So, for example, North Commons and Upper Harbor Parks have been in our financial projections for at least the last 4 years as we have been planning for those buildings and facilities to come online. In our special revenue fund, I'm showing the natural area management was, it's not shown here, but in 2026, the natural area management budget was $582,000. So this is a significant increase to this, this program by adding those 3 full-time positions, not using property tax dollars to do that, but using the state funds to do that. In our enterprise fund, you'll see that we have an increase of 7.3% in revenue, and the full enterprise fund is non-property tax revenue. So, this all counts towards that performance measure. Our wages and operating expenses, however, are increasing by 8.1%. So we still have some work to be doing within the enterprise fund to get things balanced and in line. And in 2027, though, the resulting negative $241,000 is directly related to the capital program. So that's not an operating loss. There's still an operating income, which you can see reflected. So here you can see that we're expecting to have a $2.6 million operating income. You'll see that Gulf has just under a $500,000 net income. So parking and vendor agreements and concessions continue to be the largest net operating income in the enterprise fund. And then we have the net losses in the other areas. So how do we spend that operating income? We spend it on the debt service, MRF payment, and the improvements. And with our improvements this year, we are utilizing $241,000 of reserve balances. So our capital improvement program, which I've kind of outlined for you already, this shows you the various rehabilitation programs that we have in the enterprise fund. For stormwater, again, we are trying to build our program. But in 2028, even with an increase in expenditures, we needed to eliminate those 2 full-time positions. And, we are decreasing expenses in 2027 and increasing them based on current service level and inflation in 2028. And you'll see that we are utilizing $700,000 of reserve balance in order to balance these budgets over that 2 years. And then you'll see in 29 and 2030 where we have significantly increased the stormwater fee, because at that point it would have been 5 years and since we've increased the fee. This is the Stormwater Capital Program and the 5 categories that have been established for this program. And again, the city is providing the funding for 27 and 28, and then in 2029, it would shift over to our utility fee. In our internal services fund, we have our equipment operations, our IT services, and insurance and workers' compensation premiums. And you'll see a significant increase of 10% in this fund for 2027. We needed to do that to catch up on the costs associated with workers' compensation and the current service level and inflationary costs of these departments. You'll see in 2027 that we are utilizing reserve balance again for information technology services. That's the VMware infrastructure. And for asset management, that's the, and I'm not gonna say it, the mower, the non-manned mower. And then 2028 is reflected here as well. So, our personnel summary. This is probably my second favorite. This was during Metro Surge, and we were packing take-home arts and crafts supplies for our youth. So our full-time workforce. You'll see this recommended budget includes a fairly significant increase for full-time employees. Again, we will discuss this further when we get to the mayor's recommended budget. But this is due to converting some part-time positions into full-time positions, which increases our full-time complement, but it also includes the full-time employees associated with Upper Harbor Park and Upper Harbor Park, thank you, and North Commons Park. And now I will turn it over to Director Arvidsson to take us through the capital improvement program.
Thank you, Director Wiseman. Thank you, Commissioners, for the time this evening. I'm going to present the capital improvement program for both the neighborhood and the regional parks in our system. Kind of 3 main topics from me tonight. One is an overview of the CIP and the equity metrics, and then the funding amounts. I'm going to talk about some kind of notes and changes that we're making in the 2027 through 2032 CIP, and then also give you a parkland dedication update. So our capital program this year is using the existing 2025 neighborhood and regional equity rankings. The reason for this, 2025 feels a little old. Our ordinance does require that the metrics are updated annually. However, some of the data that we normally use are not yet available during this earlier budget timeline. So therefore, we are going to still update the metrics annually. We're going to do that later in the year, and those metrics will apply to the next CIP. So when you are handed out in a few short minutes the capital improvement program itself and the equity metrics attached, just note that those are the same rankings and scores as last year. We are using them again. The capital program does continue the recommended process that we've used throughout NPP 20, which means that it honors neighborhood and regional allocations in last year's CIP. We say, once a project is in the CIP, we wouldn't ever eliminate that, even if the ranking changed. But whenever project delays are necessary, we then use the most recent rankings to determine what projects might be delayed. So a park would never be penalized for a drop in its score by being eliminated from the CIP, but it's possible that it could be the project selected for delay under those equity metrics. However, the good news is this year, I actually have no project delays proposed within the CIP. We're moving a little bit of money around between different years, but we have no functional project delays, no entire funding streams that are going to be pushed back a year. We are using those 2025 rankings to select the projects for 2032, which is the outmost year of the CIP, the one that was sort of blank when I started on this a couple months ago. We're looking at 6 new neighborhood parks within that 2032 CIP. All those have pretty large investments, so the next parks in line happen to be ones that are in line for fairly significant investment, which is why the number is a little bit lower than it sometimes is. To date, we're at 83 of 153 parks in the CIP. That's 54% of them. That's a little bit behind where I would like to be, but I think some of the parks that are yet to come in the CIP are smaller parks that will have smaller allocations. So I am still hopeful we'll touch every park during NPP 20, but I'm going to be doing some analysis on that fact over the coming months. Also, just to note, all of the regional parks have appeared in the CIP more than once. They tend to be right now on a 4 or 5 year cycle in terms of their funding windows. So we're mostly just kind of running through that list and coming back around every 4 or 5 years into each regional park. So in terms of the numbers themselves, this is the neighborhood side of the capital improvement program dollars. So the big number you see at the top across the line is the NPP 20 funding. That does have an escalation factor applied from the years 27 through 31. That was renegotiated between the city and the park board based on a 4% escalation factor. The 2032, we're holding that same number, and that would be the first year of a future negotiated escalation. So we see those increases up until 2031, and then we keep that the same until that's renegotiated. And then some of the parkland dedication amounts that you see on that third line, we sort of track them for you here on the neighborhood side, but some of that does go to the regional park system. So we use parkland dedication in both the neighborhood and the regional system, depending on what the needs are. On the regional side, a little more colorful here. I want to point out that when it comes to the Met Council and state bonds, we normally build our CIP around an assumption that the state will bond at about $10 million. That money is matched by the Metropolitan Council, divided amongst the 10 park implementing agencies, and it all comes out in the wash, and we normally get about $3.72 million every other year. That's what those yellow ones signify. But of course, that's an estimate. We are fortunate that the state did in fact bond at $10 million this past year for the first time in quite some time. Thanks to our partners and our lobbying team and everybody for making that happen. It was a big coup for us. The proportion, however, as currently estimated, is $3.37 million, not $3.72. That has to do with the fact that other implementing agencies are building more park and trail systems, and they're seeing more usership. And so the pie is the same size, but we're getting a little bit less of the pie, and some of the other agencies are getting a little bit more. Right now, I'm holding those future 29 and 31 estimates in place at 3.72. I haven't changed those CIP years yet because I'm not sure if this 3.37 is a final estimate or not. Met Council hasn't given us an absolute final number. If it is a final number, I probably need to adjust those out years because that would indicate that our proportion is in fact going down. The Parks and Trails legacy funding, the 2027 number is a real number coming from the state. Those future numbers in green are a projection that we use to build the CIP. You'll notice here we have kind of the opposite situation where it looks like the real number is actually higher than what we project. If that continues to hold true, I'll increase those estimates so that we can put more projects into the CIP. So the regional funding is a little bit more volatile than the neighborhood, and so I have to make some estimates in the out years. A couple of quick slides on how to read the capital improvement program. So you're gonna get spreadsheets, 11 by 17 big spreadsheets with a lot of numbers and data on them. That might be overwhelming, and I apologize for that. But I want to give you some tips. So the first few pages of that will be the capital improvement program, and then right behind it will be the set of equity metrics, which is what I'm showing you on screen here. There are separate equity metrics for developed parks in the neighborhood system, undeveloped parks in the neighborhood system, and regional parks. And in all cases, over on the left, we have the park and the rank and the score. And then there's color coding that shows blue parks have already come into the CIP, and those pink parks are the ones that we've just added. And if a park does not have any shading, it means it is yet to be invested. You'll see the scores on the equity metrics are highlighted. There are 7 scores in the neighborhood developed equity metrics. And each of those scores is basically a mathematical total that gets us to the total score, and then we sort for the ranking. So that's how that's done. And then a look at the capital improvement program itself. This is a sample of the spreadsheet that you'll see. Again, over on the left-hand side, you're gonna see a park and its equity rank. And then you're also gonna see a description of a project. Most often that project is called plan implementation. It's because we don't wanna necessarily predetermine what we're gonna build all the way out in 2031. We want to engage the community at that time to prioritize investments. So if I said in Park 1, we're going to do the wading pool and the skate park and the whatever, I don't want to predetermine that 4 years in advance. So we say plan implementation. We're going to be guided by the long-range plan, and we're going to engage at the time of implementation. Sometimes there is some specificity, such as with the playground rehabilitation program in green. Sometimes there are needs that we really know about. We have to do a wading pool, and so we'll put that in the CIP. Just note that those project names are something that we consider a policy direction from the board. And so if there's a desire to change some of those and be more specific, that would be the board's prerogative. We show in green the the play area rehabilitation program. And then over on the funding sources on the right-hand side, we note all the park dedication funding that's coming to projects. In the CIP, we have 2 columns for each year. In the interest of transparency, we want to show you what changed from last year. So any red text is funding amounts that have changed. And then over on the right-hand side, we tell you why. So hopefully you can follow the breadcrumbs and understand why we're making the changes that we do. And if not, you can always ask a question of the team. So for context, as we move through NPP 20, I like to think that there's kind of 3 phases of NPP 20 that we've been doing. The first phase was really early on in the program, and these were the parks that had really critical neighborhood need. These were areas with high community need scores, also parks that had been underinvested for a long period of time. These were really concentrated in the north part of Minneapolis and in the upper south, so in Districts 2 and District 3. And so if you looked at a map of those early days of NPP 20, we had a lot of projects clustered in those couple of areas. And I think if you know much about the racial history of Minneapolis, that would make sense. In phase 2, we're starting to move into projects that are parks that are just kind of tired or declining. And these tend to be scattered all over the city. So if you look at the parks that we're adding in 2031 and 2032 in my 3rd bullet, they're all over the place. Brackett, Bryant, Chergosky, Wyndham Northeast, Tower Hill, King, Morris, Matthews. They're scattered all around, and these parks all have not been invested for a long time and also are kind of declining in their quality. And then the next few ranked parks are also kind of in that mode. Phase 3 parks are yet to come. Those are the ones that don't have really community need in terms of demographics, wealth disparities, things like that, and are also in fairly good shape now, but by the time we get to them toward the end of NPP 20, they will need that investment. We're not quite there yet, but we're actually about to turn that corner. So now I want to go through a couple of the notes and changes that you'll see in the CIP. I'm not going to talk a lot about major delays or changes that we need to make to fundamentally rework the CIP as I've done in some years in the past. This is mostly just things to keep note of. They're relatively minor changes. So the playground rehabilitation program that we've been operating since the beginning of NPP 20, this was a way for us to catch up with equipment replacement around our most used, one would argue, and our most, the amenity that has the most risk exposure to us in terms of safety and ADA compliance. So we were accelerating those playground projects. As of the 2031 year, we will be completely caught up. Every playground will be within its useful life. So there are no playgrounds in your CIP in 2032 because none of them are expiring in that year. There's only one that will expire in 2033 and one more in 2035. So we're going to start to bring playgrounds in when they reach the end of their useful life, but not before. And the money that we would have used for that playground program, historically we would have done about 4 playgrounds a year. That money goes into direct implementation and rehabilitation of other park facilities. So that program has worked. We've mostly caught up, and now we can direct those funds to other amenities. Speaking of playgrounds, we have an opportunity here to renovate Jordan Park's playground right now. There's an outside funding donation that's going to pay for the bulk of a new playground at Jordan. However, Jordan was funded out in 2031, which wouldn't really work for this particular donor. So in the CIP, we've moved Jordan's money to 2027, but I've been able to reduce that number significantly, which means there are no other delays in order to accommodate that. And then we essentially make that money back in 2031 because we have, it's an overall less expenditure by the park board to renovate this playground. So this is an opportunity of kind of striking while the iron's hot, and we can save several hundreds of thousands of dollars by doing it this way. So that will appear in you'll see that in the CIP. We've been working on a project at Willard Park. This is a renovation of almost the entirety of the park, every element. We have a federal grant that is assisting us in doing that. The federal grant was extraordinarily difficult to execute and to start getting money flowing. It took us about 2.5 years between the award and the execution of that grant. During that 2.5 years, prices go up. So in order for us to deliver the same project, we're a bit short. So we are making an additional allocation to Willard Park in 2027 to be able to keep that project moving. Because, ironically, because of the delays, we are also up against a federal deadline. So we need to keep that project moving. We've reduced some of the capital investment contingency in order to make that happen. In order to honor an MOU that this board recently updated between MPRB and the city regarding the new Nicollet redevelopment, we do have a line item to implement the new Nicollet Park site in the CIP. Now, I recognize there are a lot of questions about the new Nicollet Park site, but we wanted to honor the MOU by bringing this into the CIP in a year that is appropriate to align with the construction of adjacent housing. I think the worst thing that could happen out there is that we either build a park too early or we build a park too late. And then there is a fallow ground that can be utilized in other ways that are non-park-like. So we're putting into the CIP an investment in 27 for design and 28 for construction. However, you'll note the funding source when you review this is outside funds, which essentially means that this is undetermined. By this action in the CIP, we are recommending that we keep this on the table in front of us as a potential project and a potential park, but we are not agreeing to fund the capital investment of New Nicollet Park. Another one that I think has some unknown funding around it, and you actually heard from a community member tonight during open time, is Cedar Avenue Field. It is true that we are going to be implementing a playground at that park and some new walking paths in the very near future, I think as soon as the next couple weeks, I hear. However, there is a greater need in that park. We've had to spend a certain amount of the NPP 20 money on basic safety improvements at that park. And so amenitizing that park according to the long-range plan has come up a bit short. We do not have a line item right now for Cedar Avenue Field in the CIP. However, I wanted to keep it in front of us because I think there's an opportunity for outside fundraising to try to get us a better project rolled out. If that comes to fruition, you may see this come back into the CIP as an amendment if we find funding during this year. We are also proposing a commitment to our first bike polo facility in Minneapolis. We have an active group, and we do not have a single regulation bike polo court. This is likely to happen at Central Gym. It is in the long-range plan for that park. We've come up short in funding in a couple of different ways, but we do have a line item for that under the other projects, and we're able to bring that in with some slight reductions elsewhere and no project delays. We have a lot of old buildings with a lot of old infrastructure, and so we are actually creating a new project to do upgrades for fire and security alarm systems. This is something that'll be a partnership between our trades groups and IT and also planning. What's tricky about this is that these buildings that need these upgrades are in both the regional and the neighborhood system, and we can't fund those two things with the same types of funding. So you'll see that we have a new project around the fire and alarm security system that is funded by both O&M Lottery, NPP 20 Rehab, and also there will be a bit of the IT general service funds in there in order to be able to hedge our bets between the regional and the neighborhood. And then we've also allocated parkland dedication for the purchase of the Wyndham Garden site. I want to bring this up because I want to assure you that we've not made a final decision on the Wyndham Garden site yet. There's currently a staff process underway that will make a recommendation to you in the near future. The final acquisition decision will be made by this board in a separate action. However, allocating some of this funding now streamlines the process for getting that stack in line so that we can potentially acquire that property from MnDOT. And then lastly, you'll see some minor shifts between some of the rehabilitation funds. You'll see red ink down in there. That's really responding to specific staff requests and realities on the ground. Sometimes I hear, you know what, we need some more money in roofs next year, and we need maybe a little bit less in pavement. It just has to do with what we're going to be able to roll out in terms of rehab, so we respond to that in the CIP year over year. The last slide that I have is about parkland dedication. I usually like to give an update on parkland dedication and how we're spending that. So in the 27-28 CIPs, I usually don't allocate beyond that because it's too volatile. We're looking at allocating about $1 million in 23 different parks. Most of this funding is augmenting existing projects. It's difficult to roll out brand new projects with current staffing levels under parkland dedication. So we do try to add this to existing projects. I will note that I think that there's some additional opportunity to make more allocations. We're pretty early in the year from a budget standpoint, and there are many projects that are going through scoping right now or going through final construction, and we may know more about what we can allocate as we get into the October-November time period. So it's possible there will be a staff proposed amendment in late budget cycle to bring more parkland dedication to projects in the CIP, so just be aware of that. To date, 87% of all the neighborhood areas in Minneapolis have received allocations of money. So that's pretty good. We're touching almost every quadrant of the city. Based on the 27-28 allocations I'm proposing, 77% of the money is allocated or spent. And that is up from 73% last year. So that means we're actually spending faster now than the money is coming in. So we put some systems in place where we can roll this money out more efficiently. The last chart down below just shows by service area kind of how that money breaks down. You can see the number of neighborhoods and percentages in each service area and the number of fees allocated by service area. You can see we've done pretty well in downtown and north. Southwest, in terms of the percentage of fees, lags a little bit. This is partly a function of the fact that fewer parks in Southwest have seen their NPP 20 improvements because of the equity metrics. And so we haven't added parkland dedication to those parks in the same way that we have over north, say. So I think that'll catch up naturally, but we're also exploring ways to roll out parkland dedication funds in Southwest alongside possibly some implementation around the chain of lakes, which is funded right now. So that is all I have for the capital improvement plan. I'm going to turn it back over to Director Wiseman to conclude.
Okay, so before I get to logistics, I just want to say that as staff, we are really proud of the recommended budget that we have presented to you this evening. We feel that a lot of what we heard over the 4 sessions that we spent with you on strategic direction and budget development are really reflected in this document. So again, the documents will be available online as well, but you will be receiving your copies this evening, and you'll receive the budget book. You're going to receive the budget adjustments. So every change that is reflected in this budget is further outlined on this document. Also included in this document are any benchmarks for fee increases so that you can see the comparative analysis that was done on a recommended fee increase. And then there's an equity assessment for some of the budget adjustments as well. And then you'll also receive, as Director Arvidsson presented to you, the large, colorful CIP document. And again, all of those will be available online as well. So budget review and comment. Because the superintendent recommended budget is a full 2 months sooner than we have had in the past, I have had originally thought that we would use the second meeting of each month as our budget discussion and input sessions. However, with the conversation around the maximum property tax levy, I have also included September 2nd on this calendar as well, just in case you, as a board, want to continue budget conversations then. During these time frames, you will have the opportunity to hear from the public. We will have a time-certain budget input at each of these, and then there will be an opportunity, a discussion item on each of these board agendas for you to talk through your questions, your comments, and any potential amendments that you may want to make. To assist staff in preparing for these budget sessions, I will be, don't worry, you don't have to take a picture, you don't have to remember these dates. I will be providing you email reminders throughout the process of when your questions are due to the superintendent and myself. We like to have the questions ahead of time so that we can work with staff to get your responses, provide any additional information that you're asking for. And we also do this in a formal public way. These documents become public information and are provided. So your question goes to the full board as well as the public. So we have the dates and when the questions are due. And then on December 2nd is when the Administration and Finance Committee approves the 2027 levy and the 2027 budget and the 2028 plan. Usually, the president of the board appoints all commissioners to the Admin and Finance Committee on that evening because this is the date that we like to have all the amendments put up for consideration and approval. Because when we move into December 8th at City Hall, for us, that meeting is not televised. So we like to have all of our budget conversation done publicly. So that's why December 2nd becomes a really important date for this body. Now, Paul Rosen, the budget manager that you all have met, and Stacy, my new senior financial analyst, which some of you have met or may not have met, will pass out all of the materials to you. And we'll open it up for any conversation, or I could move directly into the next item and we could have all the discussion after that.
I think let's start with looking at this budget and having some conversation. So, commissioners, do you have any comments on the proposed budget under what would be a 586 tax levy? Any questions? I see Commissioner Engelhardt.
Yeah, there was a lot to take in, and thank you. And I think you should be proud of the work you've done to prepare this for us, because it's, it's a lot to take in, but it's, presented in a way that I think we can all take it in and the community can take it in. So thank you for that. Also, I think it's a really good case for us to go out and make to the community and the city and everyone and the decision makers, especially on the Board of Estimate and Taxation. And thank you for Councilmember Chugtai, who's on the Board of Estimate and Taxation, for being here tonight, and for whoever may be watching or recording or watching at home. This is very important stuff. I do have it's a question, so sorry you just sat down. As I heard it, the difference between an 11.8% overall increase in the property tax levy and 11.1% would be the difference between our very reasonable 5.86% request and the mayor's placeholder, as he calls it, of 2.5%. Is that what I heard it exactly? The difference between 11.8 and 11.1?
President Olson and Commissioner Engelhardt, that is correct.
Thank you. Yeah, so I mean, that's helpful to have tracked that. It's when looking at us coming with a very reasonable to maintain service levels and then being played with in this way, I think it's really important to point out the proportionality of the huge budget situation the overall city is in, and then how that impacts us as a park board. 0.7% of the entire increase is the difference. That's pretty shocking, and I think people should really wrestle with that. And then I'm very happy to see the FTE allotment and the movement from some other hourly rates and part-time things to go into the full-time, kind of more work on natural areas. So just that's a comment. And then was the labor relations, everything was kind of moving fast, so I didn't track all of that. Would that be the labor relations director position we've been talking about? We've been presented with a 1.5 FTE and a 3.0 FTE model. So, and that would be potentially posting and filling that position in this calendar year yet?
President Olson and Commissioner Engelhardt, the data request position is the 0.5 of that request, so that is built into the budget adjustments and funded through this budget process. The labor relations position, we took a vacant position and will be converting it into the labor relations position, so that is the full-time position. And I'm not going to promise that it will be job description written, classification set, and hiring process completed before the end of the year, but we are starting it immediately. It's not waiting for the budget process to happen.
Thank you. That's excellent news. It's probably some of the best news I've heard in maybe all year. Appreciate that. So that the position that was vacant is like, we're just no longer going to, that position will not exist, and we're moving it to the labor relations. Okay, thank you. Those are the questions and comments I have for this moment. Thank you.
Commissioners, further comments, further discussions, questions? Commissioner Benny.
Thank you, President Olson, and thank you so much for the presentation. I guess I'll just start by saying, just pointing out again how, starting on the CIP side, just how impressive and transparent that is. And I mean, maybe if people that are here haven't seen CIP work or, government work on capital projects, planning and all of that. But this is an incredibly rational, transparent, and equitable way of spending public dollars. It's kind of a big deal, honestly. So big kudos there. I feel always confident when I review that. So I'm excited there to see also the placeholder for the Wyndham Garden. If anyone wants to talk to me about the Wyndham Garden, I'd love to speak about that sometime. And yeah, I think I'll move off of that. I'm also excited to see in the budget itself I appreciate when we can make an investment in certainly the facilities that support the staff or the workers in the organization. I think that's really important to keep that as a priority. I'm also excited to see some money being put into the Columbia Golf Course Clubhouse on the envelope side. That's a beautiful building, and it's really needs it. I'm also really happy to see the shifting in, I think, or I have to go back and look how it's being done, but the increased staffing around the athletic fields maintenance. I think that's a real response to the community, so that we have the fields that are maintained at a higher level in the organization are very good. And so we're just hopefully adding a few more fields to that category. That's what I would imagine, including the girls' softball. I'll be able to write my comments as well. I don't want to take up too much time here. I guess I'm excited about the horticulture position. I have some questions about the wildlife staff, but that sounds very exciting to me. But I'm a little frustrated by the stormwater piece. And I guess what I want to talk about there a little bit is just we have a rate. We have our own line item on the utility bill. That's why I think it's frustrating that we're being held back on how much of an increase we are able to get through city staff. I think it doesn't really even go through the mayor necessarily or the council. And also, I think I'm really uncomfortable that the CIP related to stormwater is considered it's like a gift from the city's stormwater CIP. I think that's a mistake, honestly. That can be factored into our portion of the formula. That's a simple mathematical equation, one more variable, boom. So I'll be asking some more questions around that, but I would ask my colleagues to take a closer look at that. I think that isn't the intent of what we wanted. The program has some compliance issues, both on the city side and the park board side. It is a federal permit. We should be funding that and having a say.
Great. Thank you, Commissioner Abeni. Vice President Deshpande.
Thank you, President Olson. Thank you for this presentation, Director Weissman. I just wanted to highlight that it still seems like we're doing a lot with a bare bones budget request. We are requesting a 5.86% levy increase, which is less than the 6.75% we requested last year. Despite this, we're still able to do good work in the community and make changes to the way that we operate as an organization. I would call that the definition of efficiency. And that's something to be commended, because it's not something we necessarily see elsewhere with local agencies. The last thing I would say is we are at 16.5% of the overall levy. Is that the projection coming up? So that is also almost a full percentage point less than the prior year. So our burden on the taxpayer continues to drop. We continue to ask for less, and we keep doing more with our requests and our services. And that's something to be really proud of. So thank you for this presentation. I'll be looking into the details further with more questions later, but I appreciate it.
Commissioner Frederick.
Thank you, President Olson, and to Director Weissman for your presentation. I know that a lot of praise has been given, and I just want to extend that praise as a freshman commissioner who's going through this process for the first time. I feel very confident in the work that's being presented by our very competent staff who's developed to speak towards Commissioner Deshpande's comments as well, a very fiscally responsible approach to taxpayer dollars. I'm really proud of the organization for their fiscal management of our tax dollars. I think as we have increasingly loud and important conversations about trust in public government, seeing where our tax dollars are spent, not just efficiently, but equitably, is really important to community needs as well. So I'm very proud of the work that's being done at the park board at that level to continue to create these conversations and be really a leader, I believe, in terms of how to transparently spend these dollars in a way that creates really actionable effects in the community. And I'm certain that, community members that will come to speak towards this budget will also have a lot to say about the importance of their park systems and the investment in those park systems. So I look forward to hearing more from the public about what they have to say. I encourage members of the public to continue attending these meetings. I know that we as a board do receive shout outs for this work, but really our job is to respond to you. So having those conversations, coming to talk about priorities, is essential to creating what this budget ultimately looks like. I will also have some follow-up questions, so Julie, I look forward to your emails about those deadlines so I can get those questions answered in the future. Thank you.
Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, President Olson. And thank you, Director Weissman and Director Arvidsson, for your presentations. It's been very informative, and I think I hope that people who aren't in attendance get the chance to review this, the video of this, and get a really good grounding in what our budget discussions look like. One of the things that I think I can say, I don't want to speak for all of us who are new on the board, but I think one of the things that united us all over the past year has been really wanting to focus on the people who make everything possible here. It's really gratifying to look at this budget and see such a staff-centered budget, seeing that about 73% of our general fund expenditures are going toward salaries and benefits for our employees, that we are taking our responsibilities seriously as we look at negotiating new contracts and making sure that we have money set aside in our budget to make sure that that is something that we're taking care of. The people who go out and make all of these programs work is vital. It's always very exciting to look at the capital side of things and say we're going to put in a new playground and we're going to renovate this building and things like that, but without having the staff there to run these programs, to interface with our community, to do the hard work day in and day out, none of that is going to be what we as Minneapolitans deem a success as what we can do when we center people in our budget. So I just want to thank all of the staff for really making that commitment and being willing to go along with us on the board to make sure that we are working to be, as Commissioner Engelhardt always says, the employer of choice. I'm definitely going to have more questions as I get into the documents more, and I really look forward to continuing to have these discussions and generative sessions with everyone to hear where our budget priorities are and what we can do to support our staff going forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Forney.
Thank you, President Olson. This is my 13th budget that I will be reviewing. And I don't know how to say it, but I'm just over the top so impressed by the integrity, the accountability, the transparency that you all staff present every time. It just, it gives me goosebumps. I just want to make a couple of comments. In what's called our petitions and communications, there is all of our active professional service agreements. That's not required, but we do it. And the reason why we do it is to be transparent, to be accountable. We have an audit that is done every year. And I just have to say that the past 4 years, we have had what's called a clean audit, meaning there's no findings. That's thanks to the staff and their accountability. I'm not sure if the city has the same record, shall I say. Also, I have to remind everybody that we are accredited by what's called CAPRA. I'm not sure if I'm going to get it all right, but the Committee for Accredited Park and Recreation Agencies. What this is the highest standards that you can get to ensure excellence in park and rec management. And that is what we excel at. And it just was proven again tonight. So I'm really proud of the budget, and I think it's really important for us to convey this message of our responsibility, how we have been so responsible to the community, and hope that they also will spread the word to the Board of Estimate and Taxation, to the rest of the, how should we say, decision makers, that we are accountable, we are transparent, and we are responsible. Damn proud of it. Thank you.
Back to Commissioner Engelhardt for a second time.
Yeah, I do have a question about health insurance specifically. Like we heard, it's a 10% overall increase, and that 10% number is the total cost of health insurance, to be clear. Is that correct? And then I guess further on that is how much does health insurance, how much is it as a cost in terms of the total budget, and how much is it as a percentage of payroll?
President Olson and Commissioner Engelhardt, I don't have those percentages off the top of my head. We will take that down as a question and provide the responses in the question answer document. The increase to health insurance is continuing to be negotiated. There's actually a labor management committee that is held at the city of Minneapolis, of which the park board has a seat at the table. At one point, I got an update that it might be 11% and not 10%, but they are looking at coverages and all of it as a package to try to keep the cost as low as possible. So the 10% is reflective of the park board's portion of that cost, not the employee's portion of that cost.
Okay, and the total, just the total cost of paying for health insurance, period.
Correct.
Yeah, okay. I guess this is sorry about the on-the-spot hard questions to answer in terms of percentage of total budget and payroll, et cetera. Have we been in any, like, educators are considering, they're actually lobbying at the state level to be rolled into effectively the state employee group insurance program. Has that ever been something we've been involved in as an organization to roll into a larger health insurance pool?
It would not be able to weigh in on that question, but because our benefits are through the city of Minneapolis, they would in fact lead that discussion. And remember, we're part of them and their Social Security number. So they actually would, let's say, move that discussion.
So President Olson and Commissioner Engelhardt, I'll just briefly reiterate that for the public in case they couldn't hear that. We get our benefits through the city of Minneapolis. So the city of Minneapolis would ultimately make that decision. We would be a party at the table, but it's the city of Minneapolis. We used to purchase health insurance through the market. Several years ago, the city and the city council approved moving to a self-insured model for health insurance. So that's an example of they would be the ones that would make that decision.
Thank you. I guess hopefully this one's a little bit easy. But what is the total dollar amount on that, we're paying, and that, I guess we can just do math with 10% that we pay for health insurance as an organization?
It's a separate line on this. So this is just the general fund. It doesn't include all funds. So in the general fund, we budgeted $9.8 million last year for health insurance, and it's going up to $10.9 million in 2027.
All right, and yeah, I guess I'll just give my 2 cents as well. And I think, this is kind of an apt place to be. I think with this budget, what comes to mind, probably with many budgets, is the word balance. I think we strike a good balance of priorities here. I think we're hitting the labor priority pretty clearly. We're hitting environmental priority pretty clearly. We're hitting new revenue pretty clearly. And we're staying within our means as well. And as was just up there, I think what I have been impressed by, and I kind of have taken it for granted since being here, is our projection of what we expect to need for a levy increase has been really pretty close to accurate. And so, as you don't necessarily need to go back, but as we look out and we see the kind of in the 4s and in the 3s, I think decision makers and folks in the city and taxpayers can expect us to be really close to and consistent with those numbers. When we project out, we are consistent and we are pretty accurate. And I think that's something that is important to recognize. And those numbers would be very significantly under our averages. And I think, a pretty sustainable level. So, thank you for this presentation. I look forward to seeing now the contrast of what we would expect if we were to get under half of what a 586 would be.
Okay, so our discussion on the 2027-28 mayor's recommended budget. President Olson and commissioners, before I get into this, just to add on to what President Olson just said, last year at this time, or actually in October, we projected that we would need a 5.83%. We were 3.3% off. So very close to where we landed for this year. All right, so I'm going to go through some of the easier conversations about the mayor's recommended budget before we get into the property tax conversation. So capital improvements, we show up in the mayor's recommended budget in the city's adopted annual budget because the city, we receive our net debt bonding under the full faith and credit of the city. So the city approves our CIP dollar amounts for our neighborhood program. They do not approve or have input on the regional side. And so this is reflective. We go in and just double check and make sure that the city has included the guaranteed minimum amount of NPP 20, and they have. So that is in line with the CIP that Director Arvidsson just presented to you. We also have two programs that are important to us that the city sets the capital program and actually performs the capital improvements. This was part of the 2000 service redesign. Since the city cares for the city streets, it made sense that the city should care for our parkway system. And we worked extremely hard, and I believe it was just last year, or was it the year before, 25, when we had the agreement with the city that increased the amount of capital going to our parkway paving program, and having an agreement with the city, a JPA, that sets that our parkways would be maintained at the same CPI, what's it called? PCI, close. PCI condition index. And so you can see that we are receiving close to $3 million or just over $3 million annually to improve our parkways. And then the city also maintains our parkway street lighting, and you'll see that allocation there. What I will say is that for some reason, 2027 is just slightly lower than what the city projected for these programs last year, to the tune of just $50,000, so it's very minimal. But 2028 through 2031 are actually projected higher than what they had projected last year. So just kind of a little off in 27, but good news for the rest of the years. All right, here is the utility fee schedule. And of course, it shows for actually the next 6 years being the same. So again, our next opportunity to request an increase will be for the 2029 and 2030 budget process. And I believe the JPA that is going to be signed includes a statement about inflationary increases.
Director Wiseman, the draft that's under legal review at both the city and at the park board right now does have some information in it about for like staffing and materials being at the same inflationary rate as the city would be for their portion of it.
All right, so I understand that this chart is unreadable. I tried really, really hard to get it, and I just didn't. I didn't have time to retype it all. So, I have the next slide that will put some additional context to this. But for 2027, it's 11.3% increase. So I misspoke when I said 11.1. So it is a from 11.3 to 11.8 is a 0.5% increase to get us to the 5.86%. All right, so this is a chart that I show in our budget conversations during our budget work sessions. And I have updated this now, so this now reflects 10 years of 2018 to 2027. And if we received the mayor's recommended placeholder of 2.5%, it would drop our average increase to 5%, and it would drop our cumulative increase to 56.5%. And that is because 2017 was the year NPP 20 came in, so that was a bigger year for us. But it does decrease it pretty significantly. If we include 2027 at the MPRB level of the 5.86%, our average increase over the last 10 years is 5.4%, and the cumulative increase is 61.6. So the previous 10 years, so 2017 to 2026, we were at 63.4%. This would drop us to 61.6%. Conversely, on the city side, with this mayor's recommended budget for their general fund, I want to be specific, this is just for their general fund, they are requesting a 14.4% property tax increase for their general fund. Their average increase would be 8.9% over the 10-year period, and their cumulative increase is increasing to 118%. The previous 10 years, their cumulative increase was 104%. This is the property tax history and the plan for 2027 and 2028. And this is based on the mayor's recommended budget. So this is at 2.5% for 2027 and 3.5% for 2028 for the park board. And we would go from 17.3% of the total tax in 2026 down to 15.6% of the total city tax by 2028. And you can see that in the previous time period, in 2027, when we received NPP 20 infusion of dollars, we were 18.5% of the total city tax. So that's a pretty significant, almost a 3 full percentage points down from that point. So now I've looked at the city's expenditure budgets. And so remember, I asked you to remember that our overall general fund was going to grow in 2027 by 5.6%. The city, for all their funds, their increase in expenditures is 5.3%. If I look at the city general fund and I remove non-department amounts and I remove a settlement agreement funding that is included in their general fund as a one-time expense in 2027. If I remove those two line items, I get to what I believe is the total department budgets in the city general fund. And their percentage increase between 26 and 2027 is 5.7%, almost 5.8%. Now, I want to be totally clear, and you should all go look at the budget. There are a lot of departments at the city that are receiving very significant reductions. Of the departments that are being reduced, the city departments are reducing on average 10%. But there's also departments within the city general fund budget that are actually increasing. Not very many of them, but they are increasing. And those departments are seeing increases on an average of about 7.5%. And so, as a total, you can see that what we are requesting for park board operations is in line with what the city is providing for its departments as a composite. On the city FTE side, you can see that the total authorized FTEs between 2027 and 2026 is a net loss of 7 FTEs. I'm highlighting for you at the bottom 2 departments, and this will become important when we talk about the consolidation conversation. I'm highlighting police, who has budgeted FTEs of 991, and Public Works, who has budgeted FTEs at 1,054. These are the city's 2 largest departments. The superintendent's recommended budget includes 1,021 FTEs in total. So we are comparable to the city's 2 largest departments. So what has our general fund FTE growth been? I'm using 2023 as the start of this because as I looked back into the City of Minneapolis budget documents, 2023 was the first year that I could find FTEs summarized by fund. And so I'm showing 2023 as the starting point. And with the 2027 recommended budget, we have a significant increase in FTEs in total of 25.6. And we all talked about, you know, being a service and putting employees first and the needs of our system and making good on commitments that we have planned for decades. So it's extremely unfortunate that these facilities are coming online during this period in our city, but these are commitments that took decades to get to. So between 2023 and 2027, including the increases for Graco Park, North Commons Park, Upper Harbor Park, we have increased our general fund by less than 2%. The city, conversely, over that same period of time, has increased their FTEs by 6%. So when we talk about proportionality, this is kind of what we are looking at and seeing when we are considering the conversation around the maximum property tax levy increase. The city charges us a general fund overhead charge. The proposed charge is $1.5 million. It represents a 3.4% increase over the 2026 charge. 44% of the 1.5 million is made up of 4 city functions: finance and property services, civil rights, human resources, and the mayor's administration. So we pay for the services that the city provides to us. So like I said, as a semi-autonomous body, the largest amount we pay is for finance and property services. By charter, the city is the treasurer of the Park and Recreation Board. So we do not have our own treasury function. We are a part of the city's treasury function. So between the treasury function and procurement, which by charter, the city procurement department performs our major procurement functions, those kind of drive the $521,000 we pay. We obviously do not have a civil rights department, And all of our contracts go through the Civil Rights Department, just like the cities do. So that is a significant amount. Human resources at the city, the largest aspect that they provide for us, we talked about already, is the benefits administration. So the city and MPRB duplication of service discussion. The MPRB and city have addressed service duplication over decades, with major changes last occurring in the year 2000. The MPRB has not identified further duplication that would generate meaningful taxpayer savings. The MPRB is comparable in size to the city's two largest departments, police and public works. Absorbing our human resources, payroll, and IT services into the city is not operationally feasible. It would not provide relief to the taxpayer. It would just shift the taxpayer burden from one organization to the other. Consolidation, we maintain, would not improve service levels or the employee experience and could weaken both. City staff turnover and limited institutional knowledge of MPRB operations would create additional service and continuity risks. The MPRB requires dedicated support functions tailored to our unique operations, our workforce, and our independently governed park system. Maintaining these support functions internally provides accountability, preserves institutional knowledge and connection to organizational leadership and vision, and creates long-term efficiencies while delivering greater value to our staff and the public. If we compare the city and MPRB departments, the first chart on your left is the Human Resources Department. So I have taken this information from the Park Board budget book as well as the city budget documents. And the MPRB spends $1.7 million for our HR services. The city spends $11.4 million. The city admin fee, the deduct on the city side and the add to the park board side, is the amount that we pay the city for the benefits administration that they do for us. So I've reduced their budget by that amount and increased our budget by that amount. We have 995 FTEs in 2026. The city had 4,292. Cost per FTE, we are $1,880 per employee. The city is $2,666. We have 9 HR staff. They have 62. That means our 9 staff are servicing 115 employees each. The city services 69 each. Our ratio is less than 1 employee to every 1 HR staff to every 100 employees. The city has 1.4 HR staff to every 100 employees. And at the box at the bottom, it shows that leading practice is 1.4 to 3.4 to 100 employees. So really the city isn't out of line with what they have, and we're slightly below industry average. For payroll, same concept. Cost per FTE is $237. The city has 483. We have one payroll administrator who services 995 FTEs. The city has 12 payroll technicians who service 358 employees each. And the city has a total payroll staff of 16 because the city has a payroll director, a payroll manager, and 2 payroll supervisors. So if you consider all payroll staff, they're servicing 268 employees. Leading practice is to have 1 payroll staff for every 250 to 500 employees. So again, the park board is below industry average and the city is right at industry average. Now, one thing I want to note when we talk about the efficiencies between the park board and the city, I'm not always saying that we're more efficient. We are definitely more lean. But if the city took over our payroll function and shifted 995 employees, more than that because we have a lot of seasonal, their 2 largest departments, police and public works, they have 1 full-time tech dedicated to police and 2 full-time techs who are partially dedicated to police but also serve other departments. For public works, they have 1 full-time tech dedicated to public works, and they have 3 partial techs that support public works, but also other city departments. So what we're doing with 1, they have multiple. Now, IT is harder to compare, right? Because the city's IT supports a much larger and more complex enterprise technology environment. They have police, they have fire, they have 911, they have 311. But if you look at the numbers, again, the city is within industry ranges at 2.4% of their budget being invested in IT, $11,233 per employee, and we are below. We're within the industry range for dollar amount, but the per employee investment, we are below. But of course, we don't have police, fire, 911, or 311. So let's talk about property taxes. The mayor's recommended budget has a placeholder of 2.5%. That equates to almost $2.4 million as an increase over the previous year. Our request is at 5.86%. The discrepancy between those two, we need 5.5 million. The mayor's placeholder has 2.4 million. So the difference is 3.1 million. That would be the gap. This reflects the difference between the 6-year financial projections that I presented to you with this recommended budget. And again, remember, we stay fairly close to our projections. And what the city or the mayor has recommended in their financial plan as the property tax increase for the Park and Recreation Board. So you see the blue line is the Park Board's projection, the red line is the financial plan for the park board based on the mayor's recommended budget, and they definitely are not in line with each other. So what does that mean for this 2-year budget cycle? At the top is the 5.86 that this board has adopted as a maximum tax levy, and then the plan of 4.53% for 2028, and below that is the mayor's recommendation of 2.5% in 27 and 3.5% in 28. That results in a $3.1 million gap in 2027 and a $1.1 million gap for 2028, a cumulative gap of $4.2 million. For 2020, well, for both 27 and 28, this would be recession level cuts. But for 2027, this could equate to approximately 26 full-time employees. It rolls back 10 plus years of reinvestment in parks. It's a level of reduction not accomplishable without significant service level cuts across the whole organization. The MPRB is a service delivery system, not simply a budget. Our expenditures support direct services and programs across 6,800 acres, 180 parks, and 47 rec centers. Even a modest budget reduction can have a disproportionate impact on the public. Ultimately, the BET will set the maximum property tax levy for the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board. And this board, depending on what the Board of Estimate and Taxation decides, will need to determine the specific reductions during this budget process if the BET does not support the 5.86%. There are 2 dates that are important for us coming up. September 9th is the Board of Estimate and Taxation meeting where they will have the public hearing regarding the maximum property tax levies. And we, as a board, will present our budget overview to this body. And just to note, this is going to be the first year that we are able to present a superintendent's recommended budget. Prior to this year, we have always done the recommended budget in October, but we purposely moved it up the 2 months so that when the Board of Estimate and Taxation is making their considerations and decisions, they have an actual budget document that they're able to review and understand. And then on September 23rd, the Board of Estimate and Taxation will set the maximum property tax levies payable for 2027. All right, I will open it up for discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Julie. I think it's really important to have that kind of clarification of those differences. And I will say, within discussions with the mayor, as we were kind of before he announced what the placeholder would be, and as we were advocating for the full 5.86%, there have been some discussions around what would be kind of for us a low that would not result in having to cut FTEs and not having to reduce service levels. We would still probably it would focus less on operations and more on deferring maintenance. So kind of a temporary level that we could deal with. And so that number came to around 4.6%, and that was in a conversation with the mayor. or, you know, in kind of negotiation there. And, you know, having the mayor potentially come up to that level, which is not even a guarantee, you know, would then necessitate, you know, kind of my vote on the BET kind of going along with the mayor's budget. And at that time, when we were discussing potentially, you know, settling for, you know, that lower number, I said very clearly that the board voted for 5.86%. And that is not something that I could unilaterally say, okay, we can go to this lower number. Now, I wanted to bring to you all that discussion of that potential number of, do we want to, you know, say now, we can negotiate, you know, in some ways against ourselves to go a bit lower there, kind of for the sake of coming down or meeting in the middle, or do we as a board believe that 586 is an accurate and appropriate number, and we want to take that discussion to the public and to the BET? I will follow, you know, the direction and the will of where the board wants to go. But as you've probably seen in news media and things, there's discussion of, is the board negotiating or are we refusing to negotiate with the mayor? And so I think there's, you know, this is me bringing that to you all. And I think we have also seen, you know, some of the kind of context has been around HR and these other issues. And frankly, we've presented a lot of these facts, and we have not really heard a rebuttal or kind of an assuasion of our concerns of what that would be. I've also continued to hear, as we've dug into this, that you know, they're, you know, cities HR and things like that, the infrastructure and is maybe not necessarily up to par. So I'll stop kind of weighing the conversation, but as you're kind of looking and we're having discussion about this, please also, you know, let me know how you feel about, you know, trying to negotiate with the mayor a lower number around somewhere in the 4s, or how do we feel about working with the BET and the public to push for the 5.86%. Thank you. Commissioner Engelhardt.
Whoops, I hit the light. And anyway, President Olson, thank you for that framing. And, you know, we do, well, we do have to frame it exactly that way. Where are we at and what are we doing? You know, negotiation and compromise and these sort of words that are out there, and there's people that seem to believe that, you know, compromise is some sort of core value in being a human or something. And what we've just seen, and what hopefully we as a Board of Commissioners will agree with and take out to our next door neighbor and in the entire community, anyone who lives, works, and you know, has any time to spend in Minneapolis, and certainly those that are paying property tax, is that we are one of the shining stars as a governmental entity in a time of failing institutions and failing government. And there's so many different things I could pull out. And what we're talking about is the difference between 11.8 and 11.3%, and a huge increase in a much larger systemic problem that, you know, relates to downtown businesses and different things, and an over-reliance, yes, on property tax. And this board is committed to new and innovative funding sources. And we're also committed to youth and natural areas and climate, and a clear demonstration towards labor and being the employer of choice. So lifting us up, and the fact that we came in with a reasonable request, that we're in leaps and bounds in comparison to the city and really any other governmental entity I'm aware of, and responsible budgeting and responsible keeping to that budget. When we hear service cuts, that also means people's jobs. That could mean layoffs, and it means the people that are, you know, still employed having to do more with less. And the 10 years and reductions, you know, that maybe people don't see, and people losing their job or having to work harder. And then you have increased costs with injuries and stress and mental health. So it's, you know, I think we have to hold strong, and we have to just lift up that we came in with a reasonable number. We didn't come in playing games thinking negotiation is some sort of game with people's money and people's pocketbooks. We didn't come in with 10%. This isn't a used car lot. I think it's disrespectful to treat negotiations like that. And I just have to name that we do have two big contracts. One that was on strike for 22 days in 2024, Ask Me Local 9 and Lyuna 363 up, that expire at the end of this year. And, you know, to be the employer of choice and keep pushing, we're not going to, you know, with the new committee that I chair, the Committee of Employee Relations, we're not going to treat contract bargaining like some people think all negotiations should be handled. You know, come in high, come in low, and play games. We came in with 5.86% for good reason, and it's reasonable and it's what we need. And we're talking about there would be service area cuts. We've already done cuts. You know, recreation centers closed an hour earlier last year prior to this board being sworn in, and there's no funding to keep them open longer. And this is a clear value to everyone who spends time and lives and pays property tax in Minneapolis, and it would be absurd to try to, you know, balance a much bigger budget problem off of 0.5% of the overall increase. So we need to fight for it and stand on it and go out and do everything we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Engelhardt. Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, President Olson. Again, having reviewed the documents as much as possible and hearing the comparisons between the superintendent's proposed budget and the mayor's proposed budget, what that could look like, I think it's incumbent on us as a park board to stand together and advocate for really the outcome of the hours and hours of work that our staff has done, that again and again that our esteemed Director Weissman has done, comparing all of these budget points across not just our own history, but looking at other enterprises and finding how that looks, what makes the most sense, and being able to come to these budgetary decisions that support our stated goals and our values, the things that got us elected in many cases. It would be a huge disservice to not only the work that staff has done on preparing the budget, but the work that our staff does every day in the parks to say, we're going to take a step back, we're going to cut the legs out from under the progress that we've made, all the work that we've put in. We, I think, put a lot of work in ourselves to make sure that we presented a reasonable budget, to make sure that we brought forward a budget that included some of our hopes and dreams, but certainly wasn't a wild-eyed stab in the dark at what we thought we could potentially get out of the city. We're not proposing a budget that is extravagant and looking for a lot of luxury investment or things like that. These are investments in our children. They're investments in our staff. They're investments in vital infrastructure and programs that our city relies on. And I don't think that that's something that we should back down on. I think that we should make our case to our constituents, to the people across the city, and to the Board of Estimate and Taxation to make sure that we're able to provide these things to the people who need them in our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Frederick.
Thank you, President Olson. I'm delighted when my fellow extremely competent commissioners make points that I was hoping to make. So thank you both for Commissioner Garcia and Commissioner Engelhardt for highlighting the importance of supporting employees and creating an environment across the city that really uplifts and ties our communities together. Our parks are the heart of the city, and in order to maintain adequate service levels, we've created as a system a very competent approach to this maximum tax levy that delivers on those promises that my fellow commissioners highlighted. The other thing that I wanted to say in regards to maintaining what I believe is an appropriate maximum tax levy is the discrepancy that I noticed in terms of service levels at the city, which relate to public safety, our parks are an extremely important part to our public safety overall. They give our communities places to gather, encourage young people to get involved in activities and in community. And that is a very real outcome of what our park systems provide. That's not necessarily quantifiable in terms of, crime reduction rates. I'm sure we could look at specific numbers and maybe find some, but there's this sense of investing in public safety in terms of a police force increase and a park levy decrease that I think would ultimately have a very poor outcome in terms of quality of life for our residents. I firmly believe that our park system creates safe spaces for our kids to go, and I think attempting to negotiate when we see what the mayor, I want to make sure this is the mayor's recommended budget, not the city's or the employees at the city or anyone like that the mayor is proposing that we reduce an effective and extremely heartfelt service to elevate services at the city sort of in this guise of public safety. And I don't believe that that's the way to create a safe city. I believe that we approach our budget understanding that constituents deserve transparency, and I believe that we're delivering that.
I'm not sure who is, I think maybe Commissioner Benny? Yeah, yep, Commissioner Benny.
Okay, thank you. And there's been some good comments up here on the dais. Director Wiseman, could you go back to the beginning of that presentation, because I am so triggered by PV001, and if you could show that slide, because I think I want to speak to more the consolidation of services part of this. So as Director Wiseman said, in 2020, there was a really deep look at the ways in which, the duplication of services could be consolidated. At that time, it was formalized that the park board would take on street trees. And no one can argue that we have an excellent street tree canopy. And we have an excellent program around street trees in the city. That was our obligation. But what I want to show here is, this is the paving budget, and this is what it looks like. It's always this 6-year projection. From the year 2020, so it was given to, at that same time, Parkway paving was given to the city. From the year 2020 all the way till I think 2023, the number for where it says 2.85 million, whatever, it was $700,000 flat, all the way across. So if anyone remembers the condition of the parkways, they're getting better. That is why. So when we've gone into these arrangements with the city, and actually, could you go to the next slide? The next slide is the stormwater fee. So the stormwater fee, now it's the same kind of projection, and it's circled in yellow here. Look at how the city has set it. It's flat. So when we've entered into these shared services agreements with the city, and I say this almost as a citizen because it was so shocking to me when I learned this in the last term, the park board's, the service that the park board receives seems to have a lower priority. So in addition to the excellent analysis that was presented about really the impact to the citizens of Minneapolis, the residents of Minneapolis, the service impact, I just do not see the consolidation of services as any kind of genuine way to address some of the issues here with our budget. So at this point, I do believe we should be taking this to the BET and to the public, and some of that's already occurring. I'm glad that the media has been interested in this topic, and I'm really happy to see that Councilmember Chugtai was here for a long time listening to this. So I think we keep going. As others have said, I really believe this is a responsible budget that responds to what the citizens of Minneapolis want. They love our park system. And if we have to make hard choices, this isn't the first choice. This isn't the first thing on the chopping block. So, thank you.
Commissioner Carvajal-Moran.
So thank you for that guiding question. I think that it definitely, yeah, thank you for the guiding question. I think also same with my fellow commissioners, like I think that I'm really happy to have my colleagues that we are gonna push this forward. This is, as Commissioner Garcia was saying, an investment. And so just this week, I've just been processing more than anything, just like the cost and the impact. And so in some of the email communications that Superintendent Mingora sent out, I was just processing with the HR, like if we would consolidate HR, we as the MPRB, we take great pride of hiring our young people, and if we do change services, I just, like, I'm thinking of the values that I ran, and so, and also my district, and so hitting on that or just processing, just like experiences for our young people in employment. There's also a communication about if that consolidation would happen. We do have a lot of seasonal staff that, colleagues that get onboarded, and so that delay, what could that potentially mean this past week? And I know that you all have heard me speak, and I don't know, just tragedy that happens in District 5 really, really hits home for me. And so if this consolidation happens, right, like what does that look like? What does that impact means, right? So if there are delays in staffing, would that potentially mean more fatalities of drowning? So it's just like, just the impact. Again, I'm just trying to think of impact. Like, I don't think that, I just don't, like, the visualization of the impact is just like something that is, I'm really processing with this budget. And so that's why, I'm grateful that many of us want to push really, really hard. And I agree with my fellow commissioners. This is, we're not asking for, like, it's a responsible budget that, it's a responsible budget. And another point that I wanted to make, but I am blanking. So can you come back
Absolutely.
to me, Tom? Thank you.
Yeah. Vice President Deshpande.
Thank you, President Olson. You know, I think we're fighting over pennies on the dollar. And to a certain extent, this whole discussion has just been absurd to me, that we even had to go to these lengths to be able to justify something so basic and so crucial to our city. And on the topic of consolidation, it's a threat to our operational excellence. Our back office is critical for our ability to serve our constituents. And so removing those services is going to hurt our parks, it's going to hurt our constituents, and it's going to make the city worse. And we know this because consolidation was tried 25 years ago. We saw it with parkway maintenance. We saw it with HR and hiring, onboarding and offboarding of seasonal workers. We saw it with police investigations. We know it doesn't work. Consolidation only works if there are economies of scale or one entity is more efficient. Centralization is not the same as efficiency, and I can't say that often enough. So when I hear that, and I hope the other commissioners, when you're discussing with your constituents, that's a phrase to repeat. Just for the city's HR costs 42% more per employee than ours. If our HR became theirs, we would be subsumed under their inefficiency. The taxpayers would be paying 42% more. That's the way it works when you create gigantic departments that have no accountability and are opaque. Consolidation's worse than a lower tax levy, in my opinion. I'll close with just mentioning, I was talking to the park board commissioners in Vancouver who, they did have this consolidation 20 years ago. There was lots of grand plans about how it's going to save money. And ultimately, all that it led to were city costs ballooning, park funding dropped in half, and it led to a deferred maintenance backlog that is now $300 million. Their parks have been devastated by consolidation, and their elected commissioners are powerless because they don't have a superintendent. They have to beg, borrow, and steal from a city council and a mayor that doesn't care, and city bureaucrats that also don't care. That led to a roof collapsing at their aquatic center during business hours. We cannot let that happen here. It's a phenomenally expensive and destructive experiment in incompetence when we talk about consolidation. And so, yes, I think we should go to the BET and we should stick with our 5.86% because we're talking about very little in the grand scheme of things for how much gain we give to this city.
Commissioner Benny.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't planning to go a second time, but I have to make a correction. Someone passed me a note. I said that the street trees were part of the 2000 service agreement, but that's not true. It was actually public trees on city property, which there are still many, many of those trees. And we treat them as we treat any of our trees. They're just part of the tree canopy. So I wanted to correct that. But then, you know, I would just add one more thing. And again, I think, you know, when I'm old and wandering around and muttering things, I'm going to be muttering PB001 and parkways, because the other issue about that, and I think I thought of this when Vice President Deshpande was just speaking really, really eloquently just now. The other thing is the citizens don't know. They know the parkways are the park boards. And when the parkways are failing and degrading, they lose trust in the park board or the park system, and they think, why can't they take care of anything? And so, and it isn't even ours to do, and they don't know that. And so, again, it creates this other impact as well, this sort of reputational impact and so on. So I just really wanted to point that out.
Okay. Commissioner Engelhardt.
Yeah, I want to thank, well, staff, Julie, everybody for the presentation once again, and all of the commissioners' words and sharing. I think given the discussion we've had tonight, I'd like to move that we as a Board of Commissioners reaffirm our 5.86% request, that it's, take a vote to reaffirm it, that it's reasonable and necessary, and that the mayor's 2.5% would result in termination or layoff of employees and impacts and cuts that we just can't handle, and we go out and make our case. So I'm moving that we reaffirm our 5.86%.
Okay.
Second.
So going to discussion, Secretary Ringel, I wonder if some like sort of symbolic movements is what's the process for something like this?
I think overall you should take the action that you want to take, but first you should suspend the rules to allow for something to come on the agenda to vote to it. So I just think procedurally you're going to have to suspend the rules to add it to the agenda, and then you would vote on it.
Okay. Councilor Rice, so we'll suspend the rules,
I would interpret,
make that motion.
I would interpret Commissioner Engelhardt's motion as a motion to suspend. President Olson, I would interpret Commissioner Engelhardt's motion as a motion to suspend the rules to consider a motion to reaffirm a previous action of the board.
Okay.
So the first motion would require 2/3 votes, or the first vote would be to suspend the rules, and if there's 2/3 votes, the motion could come before the board.
All right, so first, would you motion to suspend the rules, Commissioner Engelhardt?
Motion to suspend the rules to reaffirm our maximum property tax levy.
Second.
Okay, no discussion on motions to suspend the rules. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Nay. No nays. So with that, we are suspended, and so Commissioner Engelhardt has moved to reaffirm a previous board action of approving a maximum tax levy of 5.86%. Do we have a second for that?
I'll second that.
Discussion on that? Okay, Commissioner Frederick.
Is there any language in there to rebut the mayor's proposal in that, or is the reaffirming of our budget in that sense a rebut?
I would say it's probably implicit within that. And as Council Rice was saying, it's sort of just re-acknowledging, reaffirming a previous board action.
Okay.
Okay, Commissioner Benny.
Yes, thank you. I just would like to keep it, if we're going to do this, to me gets a little performative, you know, it's not my comfort zone, I will support it, but let's just keep it simple then. I think it's unifying, and I think that's a good, personally, I think that's a good place to land and stay.
I agree. I think keeping it simple and not going beyond just stating that we are still where we're at. So all those in favor of reaffirming the previously approved property tax levy of 5.86%, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Nay. Okay, that was a 8-0 vote, and we have decided that we still think that 5.86 is an appropriate tax levy. Commissioner Garcia, I think I saw your light. If you have more to add, we can go to you.
Thank you, President Olson. I just kind of wanted to follow up what Commissioner Abeni had spoken to about service levels that we see when we are entered into these agreements with the city. I share a significant border with Commissioner Abeni in our districts, and I'm certain that we heard a lot of the same things when we were campaigning last year. And two of the biggest concerns that I heard over and over and over again were, why are there so many potholes on our parkways? Why is the street condition so bad? And why are the lights never fixed in our parks? And I think that is a great illustration of Commissioner Abeni's point as to what happens when we enter into these reduced control agreements with the city. And I also really just wanted to finish by repeating Vice President Deshpande's point. This is $3 million that we're talking about in a mayor's budget that dwarfs that. This is such a small amount for us to have to be going through this process for. It's insulting to everybody who does the work in our park system, who goes out every day and makes sure that we are delivering all of these services and the experiences to our citizens.
Okay. Superintendent Bingora.
Thank you, President Olson and Commissioners. I will state again, I won't be performative, but at the heart of the budget is a simple responsibility that we are stewards of something that belongs to the people of Minneapolis. So thank you for your direction, and thank you for giving clear direction to staff. I much appreciate it, so thank you.
Commissioner Carvajal-Moran, I know you didn't put your light back up, but if you wanted to go back to your thought, or I'll give you the opportunity. You're okay? Okay. Okay, well, yeah, Commissioners, thank you. You know, I didn't feel comfortable making a unilateral decision, and I think you have all shown a very good reason why. And since that time, since that meeting, I have really started to think, you know, this is why we are here. These moments, these difficult decisions, these difficult budget seasons. It is why Minneapolis voters have decided to keep a park board again and again. It is so that we protect something that makes our city special. You know, Dan said, you know, we didn't put forward an extravagant 10%. A 10% wouldn't be extravagant. A 12% actually is what would get us back to an acceptable service level. That means our rec centers are back open. That means our, you know, our youth and our kids are able to enjoy every aspect of our parks. We, after this year's forward, that should be our commitment to the citizens of Minneapolis, is as defenders of the system, we should be pushing to restore ourselves to those full service levels. So thank you for the reaffirmation. Thank you for the marching orders. We will, you know, continue to push and advocate and fight. I think you all have been doing a very good job. Continue to communicate with your constituents, continue to spread the word, continue to get out there and have the conversations with your council members, with your BET members. This work matters. And while maybe we shouldn't have to be going through this, we are going through this, and so let's do it well. With that, I will now go to petitions and communications. Commissioner Engelhardt, we'll start on your end.
I mean, a lot's been said. I think the main topic tonight is the budget, but I just want to, I'm probably always going to speak, hardly ever going to pass on this rare opportunity because of how we're bound by open meetings laws, which are good laws. I'm glad we have them, but it's hard to communicate with the full board outside of here. So just because there's not an agenda or a meeting of the Committee of Employee Relations doesn't mean that there's not work that happens. So that's kind of ongoing, and I'm so pleased to see that the movement towards that, because you know, as that position gets filled and you know we work through that, that will really help institutionalize things and take some weight off me as the chair of the Committee of Employee Relations, to be quite honest. This is a part-time job, and I'm putting far more than part-time hours into it. But, you know, things come to my attention, and I think one thing to just continually message is, you know, we're not the designated representative for mandatory subjects of bargaining or day-to-day management, we being the Board of Commissioners. That is the superintendent's office and the supervisory chain. And it's important that we hold that up. But that doesn't mean people shouldn't come to us with concerns, whether they're a worker at the park board or a community member that has, you know, employment concerns. It's just a matter of how we handle it and navigate that. So I am asking that, you know, whether you're a commissioner or anyone else to, you know, to make sure that it's, you know, coming to me and through me, and will help navigate that in the best way as the chair of the Committee of Employee Relations. I hear people on 600 Main working on that, and I'll leave it at that for now. That's a complex situation, to say the least, but I don't want to see it move away from parkland either. And I definitely, you know, we keep hearing about Cedar Lake, and I want to see us move on that at some point as well. And just lastly, you know, let's all get out there and work and talk to our neighbors and use our networks to talk about how we are responsible and we are good governance, and there's so much more to talk about, and I'm glad we had a unifying vote on that. What, you know, we could have included to make it a little less clean is that consolidation. Like, we're opposed to consolidation as well. That is a non-starter, and it's just disrespectful. Negotiation and compromise and all that are skills, but they're not something you just do for the sake of doing it. And I do appreciate President Olson, you naming that it would really be 12%, you know, to get us back to where we were. And we have the data to prove it, and I hope people go out and look at it, and we can all pull from what we've seen and heard and really share that message about people will pay for things when they see the value in it, and they see the value in our parks and our programming and our system. Thank you.
Commissioner Frederick.
Thank you, President Olson. Just to keep it brief, as we've had a really robust conversation about these budget items, I am also, you know, committed as a co-chair on the Recreation Committee to having conversations with Director Hernandez about these, what I think we have identified as some gaps in our youth sports programming. And how can we really rally around what community finds to be, you know, really important places for their kids to participate in these activities. So I'm looking forward to engaging Director Hernandez in some of these conversations and discussion about how we can continue to prioritize these really important programs. Hearing that, you know, we're working with a really lean budget as well, but I think that, you know, there's places where we can really grow in terms of services that we provide. So thinking about, you know, further budget conversations, how we can really provide that above adequate but really stellar experience for our community. I'm hoping to keep that as a priority as we continue to look for where we can grow. So I'll just kind of tag that as something that I'm looking forward to bringing up in the Recreation Committee as we continue to go forward. But again, thank you, staff. Thank you for your tremendous work. Your incredible commitment to creating transparency through governance is really essential as we continue to go forward and have these very robust conversations. So thank you.
Commissioner Deshpande. Vice President Deshpande.
Pass.
Also pass, Commissioner Carvajal-Moran.
Yeah, I know, well, in just the previous conversation, I also did not extend my gratitude, and so I just want to also extend my gratitude to our colleagues, our staff. I know that everyone is, I don't know, I feel the stress of budget, and so just like I know that we have new commissioners on the boards, but we, yeah, like I'm excited to be pushing with my commissioners and also be working in collaboration. So just thank you. I'm trying to pull up 2 events that are happening in District 5. So I'll start with the first one. So next Thursday, there is going to be an open house for the Hiawatha Links project. It's going to be from 6 to 7:30. And on the same day, council member Jamison Whiting is, so I do want to invite my fellow commissioners and other colleagues. They're doing a day of service to commemorate Annunciation, and so that is going to be from 1 to 5 at Pearl Park. It is going to be a day of service, and so I do want to invite my fellow commissioners to, be in community. I can send more details this Friday, so just wanting to put that out there. Thank you.
Can you clarify if that's next Thursday or next Friday?
Sorry, next Thursday. So two events happening in the district. Hiawatha Links open house is happening from 6 to 7:30. But earlier that day, there's the Annunciation 1-year commemoration, and so that is from 1 to 5. And I will send details to my fellow commissioners this Friday. Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks for that. Commissioner Forney.
It's in my arms are gorgeous, colorful flowers that I was giving to our Director of Finance, Julia Wiseman. What you did tonight was just so outstanding, and I hope you enjoy the flowers, but I also hope that for your birthday, you'll have a very, very happy birthday.
Commissioner Garcia.
Thank you, President Olson. I will try to keep this short as well. I just wanted to echo Commissioner Englehart's comments that I think we're all hearing a lot about the 600 Southeast Main project. Just want to reassure people that we hear you, we're looking into this, and we're doing a lot of research and looking at what the situation means behind the scenes and what that looks like for the community going forward. And then I also just wanted to take a moment to extend my thanks to all of my fellow commissioners. Going through the first bit of budget season here is an adventure. I'm sure everybody remembers the first time that they had to go through this. Several of us are going through it for the first time. But I really want to thank President Olson, Commissioner Forney, Commissioner Abeni for all of the guiding words and thoughts that you shared throughout the year leading up to this. And I really feel like we have an impeccable team to go through this together, and I look forward to continuing this work with all of you.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Garcia. Commissioner Abeni.
Yeah, that was a nice comment, and now you just have a little light reading. I actually want to make I often pass, but last Thursday, Vice President Deshpande, Commissioner Carvajal-Moran, and I made the trek way out to Minnetonka to attend a meeting of the watershed district, the Minnehaha Creek Watershed District. So that was actually really interesting, and they were doing a public hearing on the partnership project that will be occurring, the stormwater project on Cedar Avenue and the creek, essentially, on the Parkway. And they were the last of the three partner organizations, the Park Board, the city, and the Watershed District, to approve the project partnership agreement. So all systems are go. Also, one household of citizens, a couple did show up to the public hearing. So just as the watershed district begins to do work in the city, we're already sending our citizens out there to talk to them and express concern. So go Minneapolis. All right, that's it.
All right, actually, and I did have one thing I did want to, Commissioner or Superintendent Bangor and I got an email from Ann Loper, who's daughter of Naomi Loper, who actually served as a park board commissioner and passed away recently. And so, yeah, Naomi, I'll just read a brief section of her obituary here, just this paragraph. Naomi Jean Loper, the first woman to be elected president of the Minneapolis Park and Recreation Board, passed away May 16, 2026, in Chicago at the age of 90 from complications of diabetes and dementia. She will be remembered for her lifelong commitment to the equity in park services across Minneapolis, promotion of bike lanes, protection of the natural environment through the state of Minnesota, and promoting connections between people of Minnesota and international visitors. You know, just, you know, once, first expressing condolences, she'll have a celebration of life service coming up. Sorry, let me find it. Sunday, August 23rd at the Theodore Wirth Pavilion, starting at 11 a.m. And so you want to thank, Anne for reaching out and letting us know. This system is built off of years and years and decades of tireless service and people who care. And so it's always wonderful to hear about people who, were fighting for bike lanes before I could be annoying about it, And so I unfortunately will not be able to attend, but hopefully some of my fellow commissioners can. So thank you. And with that, I will adjourn the Park and Recreation Board.